this meeting to order. Welcome, everybody. I would like the record to reflect that Board Member O'Connor-Radcliffe, Board Member Patapow, and Board Member Zane are present, and hopefully Board Member Sellers will be joining us shortly. And so welcome to our special board meeting of May 14th, 2015. And we have two agenda items, and at special board meetings you just speak on the agendized items only, and with regard to public comment. And those two items are the first reading of the Local Control and Accountability Plan, Lcap, the report on 1415, and the second agendized item is the board's setting the board's strategic goals and establishing budget priorities for 15-16. So with that, we'll go into public comment, and the board will hear public comments on agendized item only. Mr. Clerk, are there any speakers for? Speakers, okay, and those can be submitted also while the agendized items are being just presented. Okay, so we will go to our first item, C102, Local Control and Accountability Plan. Associate Superintendent Mel Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. And for this presentation, I'd like to invite Eric Lehue to come up. Eric is our local data expert. We have two parts to our presentation tonight. One is to present updates, budget updates, and the actions and services we provided in 14-15 with the plan that was adopted by the board and the data associated with each of those goals. What you'll find is, and don't be overwhelmed, there are 17 goals that we wrote last time, but they're all goals that we have had in the past. We separated them out. It was our first time at the Lcap plan, and you'll see that we have changed it for the 15-16 year. So first of all, what we'd like to do is to go through the 14-15. So with that, where do I point this at? No, I got to turn it on. I'm sorry. All right. So our objectives for today are to gain a deeper understanding of the development of the district's local control accountability plan. Well, there were 17 goals that aligned with 8 state priorities in our district's mission, goals, and initiatives, and also just reporting this out for today. And I think it's really important that we all understand that the local plan is an evolving and live document. There are adjustments that are being made as we collaborate with one another throughout the year. What we have here are the largest of all pieces. So in the board folder, there is a report here that it is called the 2014-15 Local Control Accountability Plan. It's a report to the Board of Education. And anyone that would like this afterwards, I am going to speak through this. Happy to give you a copy of that afterwards. So one thing I think is really important that we understand about the LCAP is a large plan. It's the largest. It has all of our district's expenditures and describes it within the goals. So important to know that there is supplemental funding in there. If you recall, our supplemental funding is generated by unduplicated counts of our EL students, our foster students, our free and reduced lunch students, and our homeless students. So that's a piece of funding that's directed at the students that have generated those dollars. There are federal dollars, for example, Title I, Title II, Title III, immigrant dollars. We have base grant dollars, and we have other general fund revenues. And you'll see mixtures of those to help support all of these goals. And last year we had various stakeholder input. We had one forum last year of which we had quite a bit of input, but again, we are always using data from surveys and things that we gather throughout the system as we identified our goals. So just to give you background on how we're going to fashion this presentation is last year we presented our budgeted amounts. We're going to show you how much we budgeted for each of the goals. Malaga is actually going to report the actual amounts. If there is data associated with that particular goal, what we will do is we will present the data, and if not, I will give a brief summary on how we spent the dollars, what things we did. So we're going to try and do this big, and if you have questions, if we can just jot those down, and then we're happy to address those. Okay? So Malaga, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Good evening, everyone. Very excited to be presenting a recap of Lcap and how we did for the 2014-15 school year. As you all know, this is the first year our district has been engaged in this work. And the neat part about it is that for this job, PSS, LSS, and BSS, the three divisions, work together on this, which is the best part of Lcap. Last year, for the convenience of the board members who were not with us, I just wanted to go over this color chart with you. We thought if we have color coding, it will be easier to identify the different resources or funds that go into the Lcap. So you will see the light blue. When we talk about the light blue, it's always the base grant from the LCFF, which is the majority of the LCFF. The supplemental is in the orange, and the Common Core, which we no longer have in the next year, will be the light green, and so on and so forth, and all the federal dollars will be captured in the yellow. Okay, I won't go through the whole, but you get the idea, and so our graphs will display these colors. The first slide here, we talk about our goal number 1. Our goal number 1 was 100% of teacher assignments in credential areas. And towards this, we had budgeted $1.1 million for 2014-15. And when we look at our actuals, when we look at our actuals, we notice that we have actually spent $1.6 million. So let's try to explain this. Our proposed action and services in order to meet Lcap goal number 1 was primarily to decrease staffing ratio and reduce our class sizes. When we budgeted at the beginning of 2014-15, we thought we could do this with 10 teacher FTE. That's why full-time equivalent. That's why we had the $1 million. However, as the year rolled out and we had more children, we had more students, we had to increase our teacher FTE. We ended up spending 1.6, which was an additional 24 teachers in 14-15. Mel, Dr. Robertson, would you like to talk more about the proposed action and services?
So what we did last year is we decreased the staffing ratios at the middle and the high schools. In 2011-12, just to give you some data, we were at 32.7 at the middle school, and in 14-15 we were to 29.75. At the high school in the 11-12 year, we were at 37.5, and in 14-15 we are at 32.1. So just to show that there was great efforts in decreasing the staffing ratio. In terms of the teachers in our credential area, all of our teachers are teaching in their credential areas. One of our goals was or actions was also to look at the diversity of our staff in both certificated and classified. And at this time, we don't have that data. I was working with David Hall, and because we have two different systems, it's a little bit hard for them to get this data. So we're hoping that we can restart baseline data, and I will bring that in next time. Okay.
So goal number 2 is alignment of academic and performance standards with California state standards by fiscal year 15-16. Towards that, we had budgeted $4.5 million, and as you can see, the entire budget was coming from Common Core state standards.
So on a macro level, we've done a lot of work in terms of integrating the content standards of mathematics, TK through 12. That was definitely a focus. In support of that, we have purchased materials at the elementary and middle schools, and we're going to come forward with a proposal for 8th grade and high school in the upcoming board meeting. We have rewritten high school course mathematics in integrated 1, 2, and 3. We are working on AP course write-ups. We've done many of those in the last couple of years, and we're in the process of continuing to purchase textbooks for the AP. In terms of mathematics, if we think about the K-8 alignment, we have had math coaches, we've had external math coaches, we've had a district-wide TOSA for elementary, middle, and high, and we have used dollars on technology to make sure that we can implement the smarter balance testing. In addition to that, we supported the sites to allow sites to implement the Common Core within themselves with dollars to increase their own capacity in the way that they choose.
If I may interrupt for just one moment for the audience as well as for the board, if you could go back to the slides that had all the different colors on them. One of the things that's fine right there. I think one of the things that we need to make sure we point out is that some of these dollars are one-time dollars. And when the governor said, here's some money to implement Common Core, there were very strict programs that they could be used for. It could be used to increase our technology so we could do the SBAC testing. It could be used for curriculum development. It could be used for professional development with teachers, but it was all focused on the state standards. Now here it was still called the Common Core standards. Even the governor now has finally realized we're calling them the California standards. But some of the money, the blue, the biggest piece of that pie, the base funding, those are ongoing dollars. Those are the dollars that we do our operations with. We hire teachers, we pay the light bills, we pay all of our staff. Those are ongoing dollars. Some of the others are mixed. Part of it is ongoing. Sometimes it'll be a one-time project. You'll get a fund from the state. So just to keep that in mind. And as you go through these, if you could kind of point out that this was a one-time grant. Now, they're called one-time dollars. And the good news is the governor, and today he increased the amount that he's putting into this pot for one-time dollars to help everybody in the state switch to and prepare for the Common Core standards and get our teachers and our students ready for the new standards that the state has adopted. And so there'll be more money coming next year to continue this work. I just think it's important to know that some of these dollars are targeted, others are ongoing dollars that can be used for ongoing expenses.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. So now we are looking at the estimated actuals for the Common Core, and we spent $4.9 million. And you might wonder, why was it 4.5 budgeted and why did we spend $400,000 more? The reason is because the state was giving this to us in different allocations. All the money did not come up front. So when we receive the additional monies, we have been spending it. The other fact to remember is that these are expenses as of April 30th. We might have expenses in May and June, so these numbers could go up higher. Did you want to talk about more actions and services?
No, I'm good.
Okay. The next item, the next goal for us, goal number 3, is alignment of instructional materials, supplementary materials with California state standards by 2016-17. And as you can see, for this graph, we have 2 different sources of funds. We have, in the pink, the restricted lottery account, which is specifically designated for materials, for instructional materials only. We cannot pay salaries from that. The base is in the blue. That was the budget for a total of $1.7 million. And what we spent to date, we have spent $721. So we will be buying more books. They have been ordered, but they take a while to get to us. So we'll be paying those bills in May and June. And we think we will spend most of the money that has been budgeted. Mel, did you want to talk about the actions?
In addition to what Malaga had spoken to, we are moving into the digital textbook world. So thinking that that would cost less, it really doesn't. So it's some work in terms of trying to figure out if we get digital textbooks, how do our students access it? That's just another piece of the pie that we need to continue to work on. We do have some digital versions already of our elementary math and our middle school. And we have maintenance of workbooks that we have for K-8 that we continue to purchase every year to ensure that we have the resources for our students. In addition, out of those dollars, we have electronic resources that are accessible to our students and teachers, Discovery. and World Book are just a couple of those, and those are also part of the instructional resources for our students.
LCAP goal number 4 is increase the safety of our school sites by hiring additional personnel as well as taking care of our facilities. And for that, we had budgeted from 3 sources of revenue: base grant, supplemental, and Title I. The total budget to meet this goal was $2.6 million. And when we look at the actuals, we have spent $2.4 million. I'll talk a little bit about the facilities, and then Mel will talk about the personnel that we have hired to meet this goal. As far as our facilities, we took it into 2 phases. We looked at phase 1 in the beginning to make sure that all the small things will be taken care of at the school sites to ensure the safety of our students. And you might remember, if you work at the school sites, we installed door chimes, we installed panic hardware buttons, we did perimeter fencing and gates. We also did window blinds and tinting, especially at the elementary schools. We do have phase 2 for safety, which we'll be looking at in the 15-16 school year.
Oh, and the other actions that we had put forth in our plan was the ongoing assessment support of emotional behavioral needs of our students. So that was really our first year that we have implemented counselors at the elementary level. There is 1 day a week, and we also added student services assistants at the elementary schools. Really important that we have that there at all levels so that we can begin to intervene early with social and behavioral needs so that we can get our students back on track towards learning. In addition to that, we did add a half-time counselor to the middle schools that had 1.5 counselors, and we also added an assistant principal to each of our middle schools. We believe this team is really important at this particular level also to intervene with the same needs that we are seeing. We also have curriculum that we have. It's called Second Step at the elementary school, and I think moving forward from what we heard from our forums, we need to continue to look at curriculum around bullying, going from middle to high, and the effects of social media. We heard that from our communities.
Goal number 5 is to develop, implement, and embed a collaborative learning structure and system for adults and students to increase student achievement. And towards that, we had budgeted $2.4 million, and to date, we've nearly spent all of it. We've spent $2 million, majority of it coming from the base grant, some from Title II, and some from Common Core state standards.
So this is a really exciting one, I think, for a lot of us. And from this is our PPAP Poway Professional Assistance Program. That's a mouthful. Where we have 6 teacher consultants. Last year worked with 99 teachers, brand new teachers, and this year worked with 110 teachers, bringing them into our profession. We're really excited because we have new teachers' leadership expertise and energy in our classrooms and in our schools in our district. A second structure that's been developed is the Teaching Learning Cooperative, and this particular structure allows for our teachers to develop their own professional learning plans. And just to update, in 13-14, which is the newest data that we had 1,232 teachers participate in 134 TLCs. And these professional plans are aligned to our district goals. We also implemented this year, as our whole system knows, MyConnect. It's the program called Canvas, and really important around teachers, students, and parents to connect, collaborate, and communicate and engage with one another. We will continue to embed this deeper moving forward. And we had a program called PD 360, now known as Edivation. It's a warehouse, a library, a suite of resources for staff development that we've used, and we want to continue to use that for staff development as we continue to personalize that work.
Goal number 6 is continued district-wide work on response to instruction and intervention. And towards that, we had budgeted $425,000. And so far, April 30th, we have spent $181,832. Mel, you want to talk about the actions?
We have a data
one more
sheet.
slide. There we go.
Thank you, Ms. Lalonde, Dr. Robertson, Madam President, and board members. I'm sure there's a few people in the audience who are a little nervous because, one, you've given me a microphone, two, you've asked me to speak about data. I will try very hard to be concise. What I've been asked to do is bring forth a few data points of the multitude of measures we have to measure student performance. I'm excited about that and glad to do that. Before I get into the California High School exit exam, I do want to speak about our use of data in Poway Unified School District. There's a deep culture of data-driven decision-making which has occurred all the way back to the year 2000 and beyond with the advent of the Measures of Academic Progress MAP, as well as our staff, and I want to compliment our teaching staff and our principals who use data in a truly formative and powerful way in understanding where is our next point of contact in program development or in instruction, whether that be through benchmarks and formative assessments. So today, I'm not going to speak about that multitude of data, but I do want you to know that there's much more than I will present. I'm going to speak to a few accountability measures that we hold and that our teachers embrace as well. It's an interesting time because we're in transition with the California Standards Test exiting and now moving into the Smarter Balanced summative assessment. We're waiting for some new measures to come on board. What also has happened, and you'll see tonight with the Lcap, is it has forced us into a broad array of data measures that we hadn't been touching before. We were fairly focused, rightly so, on academic preparedness, ensuring students are ready for a college-going decision. But this has also broadened looking at the whole child, and we'll share a few of those data points. In that, we know that in June, as early as June, more likely in August, we'll start to get our smarter balanced assessments, which allow us to have more programmatic decision-making at the site level, looking at how our students do on that test. What's nice about that test compared to the old one is that that test has growth measures. It has like a MAP test, a scaled score, so I can see growth over time instead of the static proficiency levels of the previous tests. It will have those as well, but we're excited about being able to measure growth as one of our key measures in the future. We still want to hold on to our primary assessment measures, and one of the fundamental pieces is the California High School exit exam. California High School exit exam is administered to 10th graders, and they must pass it by 12th. You may know that in order to receive a diploma, and we have measured this since its inception, trying to ensure we have 100% of our students passing, and this is one of those areas in which we've closed the achievement gap. We have ended each year with 99.9% of our seniors passing the California High School exit exam. Last year, I think we had 6, and those students get to go to adult ed and continue for 2 more years to attempt to pass that. So we changed our measure to say how many of our 10th grade students are passing this, because this is a fundamental skill-based assessment. How many of our 10th grade students, and we want to get to 100%. What's interesting about statistics is we dropped 2% in this area. That was not good news for us. The old Mark Twain line about, there's 3 lies, one of which is statistics. It's interesting, we dropped 2%, but because the 2013-14 class was much larger, actually 37 more students passed the Casey this year. But because, it was smaller, we ended up with a 2% gain. But again, these students will now have multiple times to pass that. And throughout the data, we will share that we have always looked at students' group data as well as individual student group data, and I will share that. In this measure, the student group data starts to shift as you look toward English language learners and special education students at the 10th grade level, but we bring those on. Our African American, our Latino students are fairly close at about a 90% pass rate.
Eric, can I just add an editorial comment? I think they're going to do away with CAFC.
Well, this is...
Aren't they? I mean, do you
well,
think
we've
so?
had conversations with 2 high levels of the California Department of Education, because one sent out a message saying that it was going to end, and then we called his boss and said, no, that's not true. So that was interesting. Okay. California High School exit exam is legislatively required. So it will take an act of the legislature. The State Board of Ed cannot come in with the API and all these new tests we're talking about and say change it. So at this point in time, there is no movement in the legislature to see that happen soon. One of the problems is if we make it the smarter balanced is given at 8 and 11, so if a student fails in 8th grade, how do you get that student passing between 9th and 10th, and is there enough time to get that student to pass in 11th and 12th? And I think that's where the question is meeting some opposition, but they're definitely talking about it.
Yeah, I need to do that. So on top of what Eric has just said, I think it's really important that as we go through here, we understand that in order to achieve any of the data that we're going to present here, the interventions start very early. We really look at all of our data as being TK through 12, intervention, acceleration, et cetera, all the way through. So if we can have that larger picture around all of this. So one of the pieces that we have in here is the RTI task force. We started that a couple of years ago. The response to intervention and instruction is a group that is working together to really build a systemic effort around how we intervene with students very early on so we can catch them up and move them along the system with success. So we have a group that has worked with that. We have a pilot around a data dashboard, if you will, called the RTI console. And this whole notion, when students come forward, we bring them to a team at the school, and the team works together to find a plan for the success for the students. So we are sharing ideas, and we hope to really build a systemic plan in the next couple of years. And I think it's also really important to know that responding in an intervention way is not only about academic. We do look at the behavioral, we look at attendance, we look at discipline. It really is a whole look at our students. In addition to helping to support the CASI goal that we've written here, we do have software programs that we purchased. We have Alex and we have Read 180. There are impact teachers that are built into this also in terms of intervening early with our students.
So let's look at goal number 7. By 2016-17, an increased percentage of our students will achieve proficiency in English language arts and mathematics. And towards this goal, we had allocated $375,296, and so far we have spent $319. It's almost a 50% split between the base grant and Title I federal dollars.
So in this particular goal, we don't have any data associated with this, and we hope that by next year as a focus, we will have some baseline data. The costs that you see in front of you are used to pay for our map that we use K through 8 as a program so that we can inform our instruction, again, to close the gap. And the Title I dollars, what I will share with you is that those plans came up in January in our LEAP plan, so how they use those dollars are in those plans.
Goal number 8, by 15-16, 75% of graduating seniors will demonstrate college and career readiness. And towards this, we had allocated $3.6 million. We have spent 3.1, and as you can see, it came from 4 sources, majority of it coming from the base grant, some from the supplemental, Title II, as well as our CTE program, our Career Technical Education program.
Hey,
Do you have any?
I think we have a slide for Eric.
We have a slide. Yes.
Beginning in 2003, we identified students completing the A to G course sequence so that they could qualify for admission to California State University and University of California as a primary measure for our district. Since then, that's been adopted statewide. It is a primary measure for many districts, but we have been following it. And through that time, we have seen growth across all areas, and this past year we were very pleased to see a 4% increase in the percentage of students who met that requirement in graduates, and we'd like to see that continue. We were noted in a study 2 years ago of performing in this area in closing the achievement gap with strong measures in our Latino and African American groups. However, they are wholly, quite honestly, as I describe it, what you'll see in our data is we have a persistent achievement gap. There is a significant difference between the percentage of students in certain student groups meeting these criterias relative to either the 100% mark we'd like to see us reach, that really is our true measure of an achievement gap, or the highest performing student groups. And so consequently, you see a large range in this group. With special education students, about 22% of special education students have achieved this. And then that goes up through English language learners, low socioeconomic status student group members, and then with our African American students around 52% meeting this criteria, and our Hispanic group meeting 58. The good news is those groups were hitting 5 to 6% growth this last year. It wasn't as if these groups were outpacing, but in essence, they're paralleling the advancement of the whole group, and we want to see that number accelerate, and that really is a TK-12, pre-K 12 effort. And we're looking forward to Smarter Balance being able to set us some targets that will allow us to say these students are predictive of A to G success, which we used to do with the California Standards Test. The other piece on the slide is a new measure, and one in which we are expanding. And that is this notion when we talk about career, how do we measure career? The State Board of Education is struggling with how they do that because the new API can only be 60% of the Smarter Balance test, and the rest are career preparedness measures, and they're struggling with how do you measure career preparedness. We're landing on career technical education classes, and our first stab at that was what percentage of our high schoolers took a CTE class last year, and that's where you'll see the numbers of 41 and 40%. Working with Kathleen Porter and our IT department, our programmers and people who run our student information work, we are developing a process by which we'll be able to measure graduates who complete a CTE pathway, and that is, CTE is divided into industry areas. A student completing 4 classes within an industry area over their high school career would be a pathway, and they could complete more. But once we have those marked in our course requirements and in our student information system, by next year we anticipate using that as a baseline data. What percent of our graduates really had a more full CTE experience?
All right, in addition to that, our actions in this particular goal, one of them was about district-wide Avid, grades 7 through 12. And I'd like to say that we're very proud about Avid in our district. It is a very strong program. In the past, we've had 2 Avid demonstration sites. And we have others that want to qualify to be an Avid demonstration site. Just to share a little bit of data, our Avid student enrollment and engagement has increased from 7 to 7.5% in the last 2 years. In 2013-14, of our 119 seniors in Avid, 78.2% were accepted to a 4-year college. And this year, hot off the press, thank you, Beth, 130 of our Avid students that are graduating this year, 107 or 82% have been accepted to a 4-year college. So what we have here is we have a program that our students are in that is readying them for acceptance into their next step, their choice for their future. Eric talked about the CTE and how we're going to measure that. I think what you've seen as a board is we have brought forward many courses in the CTE area, either upgraded or expanded, and just to name a few of the areas that Kathleen is leading to develop. The business side of it, she's got business economics and finance, business ownership. We have the computer side of it, computer science principles. We're bringing forward computer science and software engineering, and civil engineering, so we have some engineering design. We are also bringing forward construction technology. So we have a big array of CTE strands, if you will, that our students can now engage in as they continue their academics with us. And one of our other actions was to develop and implement support classes for A to G. And we really believe, like I shared earlier, that this practice starts in transitional kindergarten. So what we did is we also allocated some monies from this particular funding to our schools to use as they needed in order to close the gap, the academic gap for our students.
Goal number 9. By 2015-16, 75% of our graduating seniors will complete one advanced placement course with a pass rate of 85% and a grade of C or better. And as you can see, we had allocated $350,000 towards this goal. We had originally allocated base dollars, base LCFF grant. That's why you see the blue for the $250,000. As we got more into the program, we realized that Common Core was a better source of revenue for this. we always like to use up the one-time monies, and also we have a state deadline. We have to use it up by June 30th. So you can see the color changed from blue to green. We ended up using Common Core of $156,000 and supplemental of $128 towards this goal.
So I apologize, this is not in your packet. This slide was added late. Also back in 2003 when we set our college-going readiness targets, we wanted to ensure that students had experience with the rigors of college courses. And so we had set forth this goal that every student have access to and then have success within an advanced placement course, hopefully around their passions, interests, and strengths. And this is, as is with A to G, a data point which has been moving up each year incrementally and is now achieving 69%, which relative to other districts within the state is very high. However, it is well short of our goal of 100%. And we are working vigorously to ensure that we close the achievement gap, because that same pattern persists in this data point, in which we have students in all our student groups making growth, but it parallels the growth of the other groups in the district and is not at the accelerating point. And you have a broad range again, with 14% of our special education students achieving this goal, up to 79% of the Asian student group, and then with our other groups in between, again with Latino in 50 and African American around 50%, low student economic groups right in that same area.
So I just want to remind us all, because I always have to remind us myself, is that even though these data points look like they are high school data points, they are not. These are TK-12 data points. We work together as a system to work towards these goals, and this piece starts very early on. So if we take a look at the expenditures that we had, the monies were used for AP training, any resources we needed. We did use some Avid dollars in here, and for course development is what we use these dollars for.
Goal number 10, by 15-16, 55% of students identified as English learners will achieve English proficiency. And towards this goal, we had allocated almost $1.5 million, mostly coming from the supplemental grant and some coming from Title III. And to date, we have spent $1.3 million.
Performance on our English language learners is one area in which we have broadened our metric rather than the state. The state has a fairly narrow definition, which is that students who are English language learners should become proficient on the state assessment very quickly. We realize for some of our students who are arriving as brand new English speakers, for them, especially at the secondary level, to master secondary content within that first year of learning English is a challenge, and some students can do that, but we wanted a more reasonable measure. So we took on a three-prong approach, and the first is represented in the first graph, which is there is a test that each student takes each year who's in the English language learners called the California English Language Development Test, and students progress 1 through 5 on that measure, and there are a set of subtests. And in order for a student to move beyond ELL, they need to be at that 4 or 5 level in the overall score and that level. So that's our first measure. Are students moving up each year on that CELT test? Then the second measure is, and you can see that our growth has been fairly stable, high, but we still have room to move on that. The second measure we've identified is once a student reaches those highest levels of English language learners, how soon do they reclassify? Again, reclassification requires every subtest being at that level because they can get a 4 or 5 with some of those subtests low. And then we need to identify academic measures. And this last year we changed the academic measures to align with the measures of academic progress and our predictive scores around CST. We've set MAP scores, thresholds that we know have a high likelihood of meaning the student will be proficient on the CST. And at the high school we set English language arts grade of a C or better. Consequently, we don't know for sure because we haven't done the statistical analysis, but we saw a drop in that measure. But we still want to ensure that within 2 years of getting to a 4 or 5, those students become reclassified as fully English proficient students. That will change because we'll now have smarter balanced assessment scores to measure academic performance, and lo and behold, after next year we'll have a new California English Language Development Test because the state felt we needed some more new tests, I guess. No. But that test was ready to be sunshine, and it's extremely personnel dependent to run, but we'll be having new test measures around this measure. The third prong is once a student is reclassified within 2 years, we want those students proficient on state assessments. So I've given you 2 of those data points because we don't have the state assessment currently, but we'll be working to bring that data point back in.
So in support of this goal, as you see from the budgets, we have instructional aides at all of our schools for either pull-out instruction or to reduce the class size to provide some more individual instruction for our EL students. There are intervention courses that are built in to the secondary schools. We have parent liaisons where we have the highest of our EL populations that are working with the parents and the students and really transitioning them to understanding our systems and what courses they should be taking for their own success, and making sure we have pathways for them to do that. And we also have a teacher on special assignment that comes from this. She works with us in learning support services, and her sole responsibility is to work with our EL staff throughout the district.
LCAP goal number 11, by 15-16, increase the number of students meeting 5 of 6 fitness standards as measured on the California Physical Fitness Tests to 74% in grade 5, in 5th grade, 81% in 7th grade, and 89% in 9th grade. Towards this, we had budgeted $150,000, majority of the money coming from the base grant and about $10,000 coming from Common Core. And we have spent nearly all of it. We have spent $142,000 as of April 30th.
So this is a measure that we've had for many years, but it's not one that we've brought to the district level for the accountability conversation and how are we doing on it. We're happy to say that the performance on students has increased. In order for a student to be proficient on this assessment, they need to pass 5 of 6 subtests. And quite honestly, it's 4 of 5 because one of the measures is a freebie, and that is a body composition measure, and humanely or in the interest of student-centered decisions, we simply need to write in the student's weight and height. And that then counts for that student passing that area. So, but the other 4 areas are aerobic exercise, flexibility, those type pieces. And if a student receives 5 of 6, then that student is regarded proficient. Most students like this test. It's given at 5 and 7. At 9th, it's a high stakes test because students have to give it again in 10th, have to take it again in 10th if they don't pass, and there may be consequences to their physical education courses if they don't pass. So this is a measure. We've disaggregated it, but the data at this time I didn't want to bring forward because there were some questions. But as we go through our work next fall, we'll have that more detailed.
So in terms of the work that we've done with PE, I would honestly couch it as we've touched upon it, and it's definitely something that came up at last year's forum and last year's data around really implementing full health and physical fitness TK-12. So we have plans to move into the next phase of that. The little bit of money that has been there has been allocated to teacher leaders to help some of the staff development that we've done this last year, and also to attend conferences. The largest part of the base budget was funding that was allocated to support our athletic programs.
LCAP goal number 12, by 15-16, the number of graduating students taking at least 1 year-long course of study in the visual and or performing arts will increase by 5%. So for this, we had budgeted $850,000, all from the base grant, and we ended up spending $948,291. If anyone wants to know the increase, I'm proud to say that we were able to buy band uniforms for our high school students after many, many years. So we were able to replenish some of the uniforms at Poway High as well as Rancho Bernardo High School this year.
In Westview.
And Westview. Thank you, ma'am.
You have that data?
Mm-hmm. One of this data brings up another point that we're trying to emphasize, and we started in the academic areas such as high-level math, and that's the point of access. Are our students getting access to the programs? And in this regard, we started to try to understand how do we measure the students' experience and performance or proficiencies in visual and performing arts. And our first attempt was just to look at our graduates, how many have completed at least 1 year of full coursework in the visual and performing arts, and that number has held steady at 93%. As for access, this number distributes fairly evenly across the student groups, with special education being a little bit lower and African American being the highest group at 94%, but it's all bunched around that 93%. As we broaden this, we've experimented with the 8th grade data. We're not happy with it because of the wheel and the elective programs. The same measure isn't working, and we're going to get back inside to look at another measure. And the last one we didn't put on the board is that our 5th grade band program, if you don't know that it is voluntary, students opt to go in, and thanks to scholarships as well as the encouragement of our schools, 91% of our 5th graders are participating in the 5th grade band program. And we don't know if that will be a target, but it is one place that we can look. And these are data points that will expand. Quite candidly, our real data work is done in the fall when we get state data, and our schools do an excellent job. And this data is much of it filtered into site-level reports, and we'll bring that forward and have conversations about site-level program improvements you should see in the SPSA.
So currently, the estimated actual or the budget that is shared here is to support our 5th grade band program. It's the salaries of our band teachers, and also any materials and supplies. And Malika just told me about the theater rental at Poway High, in which we have all our performances throughout the district. So that's what that represents.
Goal number 13, by 15-16, the TK-12 attendance rate in our district will increase to 97.5% for all our students. And towards this, we had budgeted $125,000 from our supplemental grant, and we have spent to date $114,000.
We have 2 areas of data that we're now exploring on this. The average daily attendance was one in which the finance office monitored, et cetera, and we're now providing that to our principals to monitor, as this is a very significant matter because our finances are driven from this number. And so we're monitoring that. Last year it held at 97%. The other piece is a state-identified criteria called chronic absenteeism, and that is a student who is absent for 10% of the year. And we monitor that to date. So if a student after the first 100 days is absent 10, then we interact with the student family and ask, can we get the student in? That could be for a variety of reasons, vacation time or simply family resources or other impediments to getting students to school. This is another data point that we're driving into the schools, and Mel will speak about the fact that we've hired staff to support this issue, but it is obviously critical that we have students in school.
So we have a teacher on special assignment that works strictly on attendance, and these are the 2 areas of which is the focus. And basically what this person does is we'll go to the schools, work with the schools, and when there are students, and he also identifies students who are chronically absent, he visits homes, he helps facilitate the child back to school, tries to understand if they need some support services. He's kind of the person who transitions the student and the family back into the school system. In addition to some of this work, we do have our counselors that follow up with students themselves and try and bring them back. So we have kind of a concerted effort throughout.
Goal number 14, by 15-16, 97% of all seniors who have been enrolled in our district for 5+ years will graduate in 4 to 5 years. In addition, dropout rates for middle and high school will remain at less than 1%. Towards this goal, we had budgeted 100% from supplemental dollars, $217,000. However, as we went through the year, we realized that some of the budget could come from CTE, Career Technical Education. We could buy software using those funds, so supplemental grants spent about $184,000.
So this is a critical data point for us, and that is high school graduation rate. Of course, it's a fundamental activity or a fundamental measure for us that every student graduate. And while we have had very high graduation rates, it still remains an elusive goal to get 100% of our students. And again, we don't like to measure against other districts or the state, but it's hard not to say this is extremely high relative to partner districts and the state averages. I did want to put this slide up. It is not in the handout in this format, but it's hard to understand when you see it, because what will be reported initially is that our graduation rate is 95.2% for 12-13 and then 95.3%. And what happens with that data is there are three other groups. Special education students who are not diploma bound are in that 100%. And then you have students who go on to a fifth year, and the state calls that continuously enrolled or currently enrolled. And we have a good number of students who continue into their fifth year. As you can imagine, those students are predominantly English language learners, as well as special education students, and other student groups are heavily represented in that fifth year. For us, it's not, the state will be monitoring us and probably not give us full API points if we have students in the fifth year. Our conversation, and this hasn't been, approved, is for some of our students, we're okay with that those students need a diploma first and foremost, and if it takes 5 years, every student doesn't cross the line at the same time. So we're okay with that, providing they cross the line. And so what you will see is the dropout rate is also recorded, and those students have officially dropped out by the time their 12th grade graduation rate comes. We still actively pursue those students to come back in. Going back to my other point, that 3.3% in 12-13, if you go down to the 12-13 below, that is a little bit misleading, because that's really 13-14 data. That's the 12-13 class. That represents those 3.3% students who stayed on. And so the 2012-13 graduation rate ultimately became 98%. And that's a much better number for us than 95.2, because those students graduated in the fifth year. And so that's why you'll see this. It's a tough thing, because you're always in arrears looking at the true graduation rate. The one area that we're not happy about is that the dropout rate went from obviously our lowest ever of 0.5% to 2.6. That really went from 15 students to 32 is what that number meant in real terms. And we have our work at our team at Abraxas and other areas actively pursuing those students, inviting them back into Abraxas or adult ed, because we want those students to graduate. And quite honestly, we have 2 years in state data to graduate that student and have them still count toward our graduation rate. But we'll take them if it takes 3 years for them to come back to adult ed and get their GRE or some other means to graduate.
And I think, and Eric is right, we do pursue that, but I think what's also important to know is sometimes we don't know where they are. So we can call them, we just have no legs to try and find them. So they truly do stay as dropouts for us. So in order to ensure that our students do walk the line for us at some point whenever it's appropriate for them, and we are supportive of that. We also offer summer school for credit recovery. We have 6.5 period that's offered at some of our schools, and as Eric alluded to earlier, we have adult education. So we try to give as many avenues and pathways for our students to succeed so they can get that diploma and move on in life.
Goal number 15, by 15-16, decrease the number of suspensions and expulsions by 5% each year for all students. For this goal, we do not have a separate budget. We don't have a colorful slide, and that is because it's included in goal number 4, which was the safety goal. And there we had $2.6 million. So many of the personnel that we hired that are helping the students at the schools, our counselors as well as our student services specialists are included in this expense.
So in working with suspension data, the state and the district look at this as what we call unduplicated students. A student is counted once. If they have 3 suspensions, how many students had at least 1 suspension? And last year, there were 444 students across the district who fell into that group. And so consequently, you saw, relative to the year before, a 0.2% growth in that area, which amounted to, I have to get approximately 20 students. It's one of those pieces that's interesting, but because of the decrease in the size of the group, it actually were, I believe, I'd have to look, I think it's less students were actually suspended between the 2 years. So I may have to correct what I just said.
It was less students.
Yeah, there were less students suspended.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting about that data, and we are looking at it for further analysis, is that there are some student groups who are overly represented in this. There's always a challenge because are you looking at the percentage of, say, special education students that were suspended? There are approximately 12% special education. What percent of special ed? In this data, in your handout, it's looking at the group. 444 students, what percentage fell into that group, and relative to their representation in the district, how do they portray? And consequently, you'll see very high percentage of students are special education, students of low socioeconomic status, and then Latino are well overrepresented in that 444 group relative to their population. Dr. Robertson will go on and describe, I will tell you as a person who works directly with middle school, this as a primary concern, and I very much look forward to seeing those numbers decrease next year.
Me too. Malaga alluded to the fact that we have staff in goal number 4. What I wanted to do was just to illuminate what our actions were. It was really to decrease suspension days and build behavior plans for success for our students, to intervene early with whatever strategies that we can, and to also continue our restorative justice measures and to allow for reflection for the student and correction time. So that is also ongoing work that we're going to continue.
Goal number 16, by 15-16, increase the number of students who report feeling safe at school on the CHIC survey to 92% at the 5th grade level, 83% at the 7th grade level, 82% at the 9th grade level, and 87% at the 11th grade level. Again, this budget is included in goal number 4, so there is not a separate budget for this goal.
My last data slide shows the last administration for which we had data on the California Healthy Kids Survey. It's administered every 2 years, and it has a wide range of questions. And at that point, 12-13, we ranged from 80% at grade 7 to 81% at grade 9 and 89% at grade 5. Oftentimes with data, what the best benefit is, and I think our principals and our teachers do a great job with this, is it doesn't draw a conclusion, it draws what is the next best question. And so inside that, where are these students who are not reporting safe feelings? What might be some indices of where that's emanating from? To that event, what we had planned to do with this goal is we administered the California Healthy Kids Survey this fall. We have that data now collected. We have distributed to you the Parent Perception Survey. 8,500 parents responded. And in that, 96% of our parents responded. They agreed with the statement, my child is safe at school, either strongly agree or agree. That's a great measure. And then lastly, inside that data also, though, it says 81% of the parents said, I agree with the statement, my child is free from bullying or harassment. There's a discrepancy there. My child's safe, but so that is work that the sites will do in uncovering, and we will do in uncovering where does that data point hit. The last data point is the school climate survey. At the same time, the CHICS is presented. We ask our teachers same questions, and so we want to triangulate truly on 3 measures: the parent perception survey, the student data, and the staff survey around this question, and then follow up with interviews and other processes to meet this need. Dr. Robertson can elaborate.
And in this particular case, the feeling safe at school means also feeling connected to the schools. So some of our actions had to do with how do our students feel connected to schools, and it's really around working with our students so they get involved in clubs, athletics, ASB, drama, music, after-school programs, getting them into something that they're passionate about and finding a way in which they can engage that's available on their particular sites. On a larger scale, we have a lot of communities of kindness programs that are going on at our middle schools. We have school-wide programs at all of our schools. We have character counts. We have second step programs that help our students with strategies around how to work with one another socially. And so there are a lot of pieces like that that are in place, and from our data, we will ask that question, as Eric said, what is our next step? We have students at our schools that are not feeling safe, so what do we need to do as a school, as a system, to ensure that they do feel safe every day that they are with us?
Goal number 17, increase culturally responsive parent-community engagement and communication strategies in order to support student achievement. Towards this goal, we had budgeted from our base grant $413,195, and to date, we have spent almost all of it. $409,000 has been spent.
So I hope what we've seen, at least in the last year and the last couple of years, that we are visibly electronically out in the world. We have pictures, we have phrases, we have words that are out there on Facebook and Twitter. We have email addresses in which the community can provide input. We've had community forums. We've had Innovation U. We have a myriad of ways in which we can collect data, and it's lots of data, but it's all the voices that we serve that we need to listen to. So in terms of taking a look at the expenses we have here, we had a couple of programs that we purchased this last year, the Innovation U, of which our whole system can submit ideas around a particular question. And these are really kind of problem-solving places for everyone to engage in, and we get a variety of ideas that are really excellent in terms of everywhere they come from. We also had purchased a K-12 Insight. From K-12 Insight came the Poway Professional Leaders. It was a group. Is it leaders? Learners. Poway PL, I'm sorry. Poway.
Team PL.
Team Poway PL. I am sorry for Team Poway PL. I was like, I know it's got all that. Anyway, what's so powerful about that group is it is a combination and representative from all units working together around what does growth look like for all the individuals in our system, a professional development plan. So while we looked at that as a way to start communicating, it actually germinated a really great group that has come together throughout the year, and I believe they're developing a white paper on staff development. So those two things are, and then we have a web designer who is also paid out of that. And with that, that is our update on the 17 goals from the 13-14 year. So we'd like to thank you for that. Questions?
All right, I just want to say thank you for that most excellent report, and especially the color coding. Really appreciate that visual effect. It helped to assimilate all that information. I've got a pile of questions. I'm going to ask my fellow board members first if anybody has any questions they'd like to start with.
I wrote down several as we were going, so I have to flip pages to find them. But the first one was on goal number 8. This is graduating with A through G requirements. One of our proposed actions says develop and implement support classes for A through G success. What does that look like? What is that?
What that typically looks like for a high school and a middle school is really an intervention class. So those are typically courses that are focused either on mathematics intervention, reading intervention, writing intervention.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Also, regarding goal number 8, I think Eric had used the phrase persistent achievement gap, particularly with some minority subgroups, including African Americans and Latinos. Can you give me an idea as to what specifically, some examples of what's being done to address that as opposed to the overall achievement of the goal?
So in our classes, there is differentiation that's going on. We probably need to do more work in terms of how we differentiate that in order to support our students. I also do believe that we could probably support our students, our African American students, our Latino students, talk to them around what is it that you need in order to succeed academically and working with their families and building those into our programs. So that is a next step for us. One year, one of our principals spent some time with some Latino students, talking to them about just Algebra 1 and what would be helpful. And she brought some insight to some pieces around there. So it's somewhat of a pedagogical kind of a process that we will build into our work around mathematics to ensure, at least early on mathematics, to ensure that we are differentiating to the needs of our students.
And this area has been of prevalence with us, and we have instituted much stronger measures in monitoring the performance of students beginning at elementary through middle school and then intervening, so that we're not trying to solve this problem at the high school level. Support classes, our principals are trying to seek new alternative methods to give students support classes, but also engage the student in that critical relationship piece. And where do they have connection, relationship, and see themselves within staff members, but also see themselves in the curriculum.
And I think the other piece to that is, and I don't know why I didn't bring up, maybe I just skipped over it, is the notion around we have a focus on cultural proficiency, and to helping our whole system to understand the cultures, however you want to define culture, and have an understanding around that, and how do we engage that into our teaching and learning process to ensure success for our students and the families that we're communicating with. So that's an ongoing piece of work for us, but I think that's also really critical in terms of engaging the family and the student for their academic success.
Just a follow-up question on that. So who would take the lead in that case with the school site? And you mentioned the principal intervening, but would the counselors take a lead role, or the
what I'm really hoping
teachers,
is the whole school's taking the lead role in that, so as we continue to do that work. So what we've done this year is we have worked with our principals, and we have worked with our counselors. So from our level, we've done that work, and what we want to do is to continue that work and help support our site leaders so they can continue the work on their sites. And I'm sure there are many people on the sites that understand this work and that can work with the administrators there.
An interesting process. Sometime at elementary or middle are what are called articulation meetings or student study teams, but periodically the teachers will meet, they'll look at the data, and they will identify those students that need an impact teacher or some follow-up with counseling or those pieces. And so there is a process in place at every school to monitor which schools are not achieving at that level, and in that you're targeting those students who would be on track not to reach that criteria. And then, as Mel said, there's above and beyond too, given some of the significance of being a student who may be in a different place than some students, whether that be from just home effects or whether that be from other factors that comes with coming to a school.
Well, okay, it's just going to be the Eric and Mel
Yeah,
conversation.
once we get started on this, it's going to be a while.
Yeah, you're going to be in a meeting with us. The one thing I do want to note, though, that I think is really important and some critical work that we are all doing is how do we find multiple pathways for students to succeed. And so as soon as we start embedding all of those in the system and giving choice to our students and maybe allowing our students to choose some ways in which they can achieve, I think that will open doors for not only some of our students who are in the gap, but maybe students who are not in the gap, and just allow them to excel also.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. Patapow.
A question on number 13. In the past, we've had the probation department working with the schools for absenteeism, and also then with using the SAR board. Is that out of the picture now, or how do we use that?
We're not using that right now. When California went through all the budget cuts, that probation officer was funded by the probation department, and they cut the funding for that. But Mel is working with her team on complete relook at our attendance and discipline team and student support service, and see if there are different ways that we could set up models like that. We do not have our own SAR board like we used to, Andy. The county's required to keep one. But that is a big piece that I think we're looking at this year. There's been some changes in staffing, and we're looking at how do we need to change that work, and that goes along with the attendance rate and the truancies and so forth. And back to the other question, I just want to point out in terms of the achievement gap, I think the biggest work that we can do to address the achievement gap is to work on the whole notion and the challenge that I put out to all our people this year, which is personalized learning. Let's design the learning for the child, not have the child fit into the learning that we've designed. And that's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of professional development. There's technology involved in that. But we're seeing some good steps being made on there on student-centered, student-centric learning, personalized to each individual student, which will address some of the cultural proficiency issues.
Well, the reason I mentioned the Student Attendance Review Board, because the SARB, because that was cost-effective and it brought money back, and it didn't cost us. All we had to do was organize the parents, because when the parents were brought, when that was brought up with the student when they're not in attendance, they got their act together, a lot of them, and came to school, and it was a big deterrent.
And I do think that'll be something that we'll be looking at, how we incorporate that into the new model, because you're absolutely right. If that work is done, Malaga reported to you, or will be reporting to you tomorrow, that we've actually had a slight decrease in our attendance rate. So it's certainly worth an investment, because a 0.5% of a decrease in attendance is $500,000. And so just financially, not to speak of, obviously, the importance to the student to be here and to be engaged in learning. So we'll be looking at those other issues as well.
Okay, my turn. Okay. I don't remember which LCAP goal in the beginning. I didn't write them down. The safety, with regard to safety, it had been brought to our attention that New Directions had some security issues. There was a news piece on it. I was just wondering where we were with those. Basically the Twin Peaks Center with Adult Ed and New Directions over there.
Yes, Ms. Beatty, we did do some work at the Twin Peaks Center. I don't know if you've been there lately. We do have a fence that is around the Adult Education Center and some of those classes. But what they want in addition is some cameras installed, and we're looking at that for next year.
I think the issue was, I guess this news crew had come in to where the students are in the New Directions area, and there was no, I guess, check-in or sign-in process or something like that. Is that?
Ms. Kathleen Porter has been taking care of that. What they did was, there used to be 2 doors by which outside people could come in. They've made sure that one is always locked, and then there is a receptionist. There was a lady who used to work there, but they've made her like a receptionist now, so that people have to check in first with her. But Kathleen has asked for additional measures such as the cameras, and we're looking at it for next year.
Okay.
You mentioned that there's phase 2 going on for the facilities and safe, clean learning environment. Can you tell me, just give me an example of what's included in phase 2? I don't need the whole laundry list, but some
Yes.
examples of what that is.
Yeah, phase 2 is an expensive phase, so we are waiting for some one-time monies, and I think I may get that in the May revision, which will be great news. And we are looking at emergency response buttons with probes to be installed in all of our school sites. So, for example, if a teacher or someone sees somebody that is suspicious, they'll have a button in their classroom, which when they push it, it will light up in the office. And so the police can be called or security can be called right away. They're looking at that. They're also looking at doors that will close right away, springs, latches, cover plates, and such. And all of that is going to cost about $2.5 million. So that's where we are waiting for some one-time funding on that.
As a related follow-up question to that, to what extent is this phase 2 implementation, do you work with the individual school sites and their site-specific plans for the safety improvements?
What has happened is, previous to getting these 2 phases that we detailed out, Mike Tarantino, our Director of Facilities, and his supervisors visited the school sites and actually met with the principals to see what needs are there. And it's because each school site is so different. Sometimes the perimeter fences will be needed around the playground area. Sometimes it is the area between the office and the actual classrooms. So they have detailed drawings on all of that, and that's how this was calculated.
And taking it just a step beyond the physical perimeter safeguards, I noticed that, for instance, in some of the site-specific plans, some schools are going so far as to put gas masks and plastic bins in their classrooms and that sort of thing. Does the phase 2 on a safety rollout for schools take into account this level of safety precaution?
The emergency supplies, you mean?
Supplies,
that is part of the emergency operations center that we operate from the district office, and we have a team of directors that report to Dr. Collins and myself, and we have those safety plans in all our schools already. We have emergency supplies, we have lockdown measures, we have evacuation processes, and we try to keep those up to date with manuals that Dr. Elaine Cofrancesco's office handles, and they visit the school sites to make sure that the schools know about those.
Part of that will also be some new training. I know Cindy Hicks has been working with each of the school sites about their individual school safety plan for evacuation, or what do you do in case of this or that. And by school, they'll be identifying where they believe they need more training or improved plans. We also work with local law enforcement and first responders, and sometimes we'll focus on a school in particular, and they'll go out and watch a drill and give us feedback on those kinds of things.
This may be a brief digression, but it reminds me of something I didn't bring up when I saw those site-specific plans, which is specifically, I noticed that some of them had renderings of floor plans for each of the school districts, where the exits are, et cetera. My hope was, and it still is at the time, that maybe that is considered relatively proprietary and doesn't go beyond the board, because I think to put that out there, where all the exits and entrances are in all the schools, is probably not the best in a safety environment.
One of the things that we just did, and I just talked to Cindy about this 2 weeks ago, is the law enforcement agencies have asked for all of that to be downloaded onto pen drives, so that rather than having to find the book and see, it'll be updated every year on a pen drive, and they can put it in their computer, in their police car, or on their vehicle, and they can pull up the school's plans and have that right there in front of them. And so we're in the process of doing that right now.
That's not something that's just readily available on a website anywhere, correct? Okay, thank you.
Does that include the shut-off mechanism for, like, the alarm systems? They had that incident over at Twin Peaks where they couldn't, so it would include that kind of information if
that is correct,
their
Ms.
alarm
Beatty.
went off and they
Yes,
needed to shut it down.
that information will be included in those packages. The intercom that went on and nobody knew how to turn it off. That's your question, right? It was at Twin Peaks Middle School.
Yeah, or it was a fire alarm, or
It was a fire alarm, and it rang through the school, actually in 2 schools, and the staff that was there that day did not know how to turn it off. But since then, our IT department handles that, and they have taken care to make sure that somebody in the schools are aware of those.
One other question on goal number 9, the Avid program, AP courses, and the training for teachers, counselors, and administrators. My question, how much, it seems like there's limited funds, 250, 350,000 isn't much for training for all these people to increase that 75%, but how much of that money was actually spent, and how do you feel about that?
Well, we like to grow it, and as we can, we do. So we've been minimizing the training for that, but trying to continue. So the model we moved to for AP is if your course was a course that was being updated by College Board, we only sent those teachers. And if you were a new teacher to AP, what we'd like to do is be able to send more to stay up with the content for the courses that they offer.
The reason I ask that is because listening to Mr. Bennett talk to the board, and the research has proven that the more training you give the teachers, administrators, the better overall for scores, et cetera, et cetera. It's a plus.
I'll be working with Mulligan.
Goal 12.
Oh, we're moving along.
This is the 1-year-long course of study in visual and performing arts. It says that one of our proposed actions there is survey interest and analyze student engagement in the performing arts. Do we do that?
So one of the things we did this year was we took data from the elementary schools initially to figure out what do we have going on. And so one of our proposals for next year is that we have a committee that takes this data and we'll look at how do we build in the visual performing arts and also PE into our elementary schools. So our hope is that we come forward with a plan that we can present to the board and we can look at some options in terms of integrating that into our elementary schools. And go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, when you say a plan, you're looking at that coming forward for 16, 17 or
Correct.
15, 16? Okay,
Yeah,
16,
so
17.
we have all the data now that we've collected from our elementary schools. And now hopefully we can have a committee work together from lots of representatives, probably led by someone in LSS, and then put forward either a single-year plan or a multi-year plan so that we can have baseline programs, at least at all of our elementary schools. And then if the parents want to do anything on top of that through foundation or PTA, they can, but at least we can ensure that all of our students are engaging in PE and art at some level throughout the system.
As part of our Lcap stakeholder engagement under the direction of Noreen Walton, she led the superintendent's student committee. I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name. In a student survey of all the high schools, and those questions were asked. Do you have classes that reach your passion? Do you have classes that you feel direct you toward new interests in those questions? And I believe we've compiled those reports, this parent survey, that survey, and others to distribute to you for, this week. And lastly, one of the music teachers came to me and shared with me that one of our neighboring districts has built a comprehensive TK-12 performing arts plan, and so they've asked to come forward to Learning Support Services and share that and ask the question, how can we use this kind of resource? It might, a little district called San Marcos.
Little district.
Why do we have to out them?
Oh, I've got a couple of questions on those. So on 12 and 13, with regard to PE, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, my education journal mentioned some organization that's filing lawsuits against school districts for not meeting the state mandated PE requirements at elementary schools. Are we?
Yeah. I'm going to look to my elementary colleagues. Meeting the 200 minutes every 10 days.
It's the same question I had about goal number 11. Yeah, the CSBA illegal alert. Yeah.
But the bottom line is that we're
yeah.
not funding it as a district. They're funding it at a site level.
Because I was
100%,
say,
right, at this point?
My kids are no longer in elementary school, but when they were, they lost PE staff, PE teachers. So you either had a volunteer or teachers, regular teachers, or.
So what our survey showed was that our sites, some have a PE aide that support the PE, some, and then they blend it with teachers also teaching the required minutes. So, but again, going back with Dr. Robertson, we're trying to think of ways so that we are ensuring consistency across our district. So we're aware of that lawsuit. We brought it to the attention of our principals back in October. And so we've been working to ensure that those minutes are indeed happening.
When you say that lawsuit, not against us particularly, but that this group is filing them.
That is correct. It came to our attention that this was happening up in Northern California back in October. So we've been working to not be one of those districts on the list.
And Ms. Beatty, just as a point of clarification, in the elementary schools, it is the teacher's responsibility to provide the PE minutes. There are some schools that are lucky enough to have the opportunity to provide a PE aid, but if that is not there, then it is the teacher's responsibility. Not that it's easy to do that, because it isn't, but
Uniquely California.
that is part of their responsibility.
And what is the requirement? You said 200?
200 minutes every 10 days.
Every 10 days. I see.
So you knew about it in October. We're just getting an alert from the CSBA in May. I'm just
register a complaint. And then with regard to 12, the visual and performing arts, I think that was focused on, the goal number 12 was focused on the high schools, but I know also, we have had tremendous cuts in the last 5 years, and we had art teachers were cut in the middle school level. So with regard to that goal, are we looking to restore those positions? And then just to add to that also, with regard to the elementary school band program, probably most people don't even realize the 5th grade band program is actually 50% of what it was, I think, 12 years ago. It was twice a week, and then it was threatened to be cut 100%, and then they brought it back 50% to 1 day a week. So again, it's there with regard to that push goal number 12 to bring back the art teachers in middle school and the 5th grade band program to bring that back to 100%.
Okay, so I guess historically I didn't know that about band, so okay, I'm going to go back and check my history piece.
Okay.
So what I can tell you at the middle and high schools is that our programs are driven by student interest. So it's what students sign up for. And our hope is that as we increase it at the elementary movement and middle to high, that we can have a greater participation or election of our students to take these courses. So I can speak more specifically to high school, just because I look at those numbers a lot. And what we've noticed in terms of the visual and performing arts over time is that we have had less students interested in taking choir and or drama. Band is not a problem. We have lots of students that are very interested in band, but even some of your, what I would call the art, I don't know, it's not basic art. The art that the students are interested in is moving into the digital age. That's what they're all signing up for, and it's a different credential to teach that course versus drawing and painting. It's not fundamental, just the core art courses that we all know. So there is a shift in interest of our students, and so what we want to do is really match the students' needs. This is about them selecting their passion and trying to support that as they develop their own program. So that is a pattern we have seen over the years, is that shift. Even wet labs of photography, very low interest in. So.
I'd like to speak briefly to the 5th grade music program because, yes, indeed, it was cut back. But what we found, there's another side to that. And the 5th grade classroom teachers were pleased that they weren't losing their students as often during the week because of the academic program. So I don't know if we have any 5th grade teachers out there, but I happen to be married to one. And I could remember she was thrilled when the band program was cut back because she had her students more often, didn't have coming and going to band. And the numbers have not dropped at middle school. So the 5th grade music program is still supplying and getting the numbers. Our middle school teachers are working with those 5th grade teachers and trying to keep that flow coming. So there is always that push and pull on, do you take the kids out of the classroom to do the band? Do you do it after school? How do you do that?
I think there's a...
And did you say that it was 91% of 5th graders participate?
Mm-hmm. That was
all 5th graders participate?
I was surprised. It was a little higher than I thought it would be. I'm kind of double checking it. We just got that data, but I was very happy to see that number. I think on this point also is there's an opportunity for an intersection because there are industry areas in career technical ed which are about what are the creative arts. And this notion of a creative economy is one in the literature where people are paid well and there are great career opportunities. And in that are the arts, are digital media, as well as tactile media. And so I think as we bring CTE courses on, how do we ensure that we have kids engaged in visual and performing arts as an area of interest? So I think that's opportunity for us.
I just think the challenge with that shift is the credentialing piece that comes with that. So that's the shifting in CTE. While the interest is going there, our teachers who are fantastic and have been here for a while don't no longer qualify to teach that particular course. So we're going to have to figure out how we can help all of that in the system.
Does that go for the middle school too? Because I had mentioned the cut And that's just because as a parent, you got the email from the middle school art teacher complaining about losing his job, wanting to restore that.
I don't know that one in particular. I'm going to. I don't even want to assume. I just believe that the sections are devised or developed around the student need or student.
Or I guess I was just
requests.
wondering if the middle school art programs were going to be restored, assuming they have not been. That art is not at the middle school level is not what it was. If there was a push to do that at the middle school as well as the high school.
I think, again, that opportunity exists in which students see in the class an opportunity of high interest because, as Dr. Robertson has pointed out, speaking to one principal just this past week, the course requests for the standard art course aren't there. And so how does that art teacher say, okay, I don't want to make it a capital-based system or a market-based system, but those electives draw students to them, and we need to make sure we're providing the teacher the resources so that she can offer a course that gets students to say, that's my interest.
And just add to what you're saying, because the BUZZ acronym now is STEAM, to include the arts. And my husband's colleague in computer programming, who's a highly accomplished computer programmer, was an art major in college. So he always says it's the creative mind that makes the best programmer.
The music teachers, if they were here, would tell you clearly there is great body of research that students' participation in the arts and music has a direct effect on academic performance. And that's something about the Lcap is getting us to the point of taking a very narrow curricular focus that NCLB and the standards-based movement brought, which had great benefit, but narrowed the curriculum, and now we have an opportunity to see how we can broaden it.
Well, that would be like a perfect segue into part 2 if you're all
Actually,
done.
I still have a few more.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about the elementary school principals, counselors, and that was a big deal. I remember at the community forums that was the #1 priority. Actually, I think that was the Innovation U top contender. But to the previous board's surprise, then at the same time that we allocated this $1 million+ for the additional counselors and staff support, then we found out that student support services at the high schools had lost their funding.
They did
and so
not.
Then
we were able to.
Well, then were they on the verge of it, and then we restored it?
And we brought them all in supplemental. They were all in place.
Our problem was many of those positions are grant funded, and when the grant goes away, we have to find other resources.
Yeah, and we've been hearing, our current board's been hearing that indeed, I guess there's one staff position that's funded operationally, and then the other has to be grant or fund. They have to fundraise. The TOSA has to fundraise for her position, and there was a request to make that budgetary.
And that's a different structure, and so she's an actual credentialed teacher, whereas the student support services person at all our school sites are not. They're a classified position. So that's what their funding is, the gap between what we have given the schools for the student support services person to pay the rest of her salary. That's a choice that the school has made to release her for that time.
Oh, okay. So that's just a school site decision. So what does what do we pay for at the high schools with regard to the student support services staff?
I'd have to look that up. I can't remember how many hours off the top of my head what they are.
And is it so many hours for one counselor or for more than one?
The student support services person?
Yeah, the
at the high school?
classified, yeah.
I'd have to look and get back to you. I don't know if it's a 15-hour or 18-hour. I can't remember. I can get that information to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Student support,
Yeah,
the student support
Mm-hmm.
services. Run the peer counseling and all that. It's good stuff. And then you had mentioned second step curriculum, and I'm not super familiar with that. The one program I did know really well from back in the day was the PIP program, and I don't know if this
That's
is comparable.
the curriculum
but
that they used. Is that correct, Cindy and Kimberly? The PIP used the second step curriculum.
Right.
Okay, yeah, because PIP was impulse control or changes. It had those two, and it was, like trained adults to social skills, and it could be a one-on-one with a student or going out to the playground and just monitoring the Wild West atmosphere out there, and it was a
So
fantastic.
if you like, we can actually get you the curriculum to look at and look at the lessons that we actually implement at the elementary school.
So
we get you
so
into that.
for all intents and purposes, then PIP is back. Then it's back in this.
PIP was a
incarnation,
specific program that was really a definition of personnel, the primary intervention program, in which we put a person in place to create connections with students. And the school services person will address a broader range of needs. And the second step program then is the curriculum by which that person can do small group interaction, of course, with parent consent, or interaction with individual students. So it gives our staff a resource that they can rely on around specific topics, whether it be friend making or anger management or those pieces.
Yeah, because that
Impulse
was
control.
just a really great, cost-effective program for early intervention. So it's good to know.
And I think when we're ready to go on with the recommendations for next year, you'll see that some of those areas are being recommended to be continued and expanded.
Correct. So it's not a one-time thing.
Yeah,
This is an ongoing
it's a multi-year
and going
program,
deeper.
trying to phase
So
it
that-
in and get it built back up.
And then LCAP goal number 5 addressed the PPAP, and one of the professional trainings was the technology integration. And the board received a letter signed by 17 teachers that said that that technology, the professional development with regard to supporting technology, was lacking a cohesive plan and vision, and further said that we're in dire need of a coherent program and adequate resources to meet teachers where they are and provide support for successful integration of the Common Core standards with technical tools. So are we working towards that? I know they've been active. They were active, a couple of them, on the Innovation U site as well. So I just wanted to find out if that would be.
So I think as we look at just some of the goals and actions that we're proposing, what we don't have written as very specific pieces. They're the larger pieces. So if the priority is around this large piece, then we take it as staff and we build into how do we make that happen. And so the integration of technology is very important to all of us in terms of its alignment with the Common Core or the California state standards. So how we push forward, I think we have to think about together as we move from mathematics into science and English language arts. So it is a focus of ours as we look at the curricular, instructional, and assessment program.
And I had a question about the RTI. That was the intervention program.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of, and again, I'm old school here, talking about boosters. Boosters was an intervention program where kids struggling in elementary school would come in, like maybe it was just site specific, but they'd come in for an extra hour in the morning. I mean, is that the kind of programs that they're doing with regard to? I guess I wanted to also find out what grades that RTI was for.
Okay, so first of all, a response to instruction and intervention is a TK-12 program. I don't know what boosters is, but basically what this is how do we identify systemically our students who are not achieving academically for whatever reason. It could be academic or it could be behavioral, social, emotional. Each of our school sites has a powerful team that looks at our students, and what they do early on is they build a program for our students to intervene with them, whatever their needs are. So they work as a systemic team, and what they do is they put those interventions in for a period of about 6 weeks. If they have to come back and revisit that particular piece and reboot it, if you will, they will meet again, or they may have developed a plan that is provided for the success of the student. They just need to make sure it stays on as the student moves in. The other thing that's part of the RTI program is to have, especially academically, do we have a universal program that we will use, I don't know, for all first graders in terms of they can't figure out the main idea from a reading. I'm just making something up. So do we have something that can work with all of them that we can use as a system to help them? So the intervention programs early on, we don't have those systemically, and we'd like to be able to identify those and purchase those for our students to be able to use at all our schools.
So RTI is not a specific program. The RTI team would recommend a program for some students or try to seek a program solution. RTI is the process by which teachers come together, seek solutions for individual students.
And I think the most important piece about RTI is the most important part of RTI is the classroom teacher. That is the very first intervention and the most critical intervention for our student.
Oh, and was that new? Has that been around for a while then, the RTI?
Several years.
Oh, I'm seeing nods out there. I don't remember. Called RTA, but the concept of it has been around for a long time. Whether we called it response to intervention and instruction.
Right.
10.
And under the leadership of Mercedes and Don Kastner before, but it has come back with a new process and new leadership and a pretty exciting technological resource by which we can do a better job of monitoring as well as identifying for the site some leading indicators that this student is somebody, if is not on your radar, you may want to take a look because MAP scores, absentee rates, other factors are warranting a conversation.
And I because and maybe these are part of the program with the boosters. I had a child who'd come in. It was like a 9-week program, and he'd come in an hour before school started, 3rd grade, and get extra math help.
And some of our schools have that.
Yeah, and then the reading. You know, it's as you mentioned, the students not getting the comprehension or they're not fluent in their literacy, just in the early grades, like 2nd grade, and they're pulled out of class for that one-on-one with the reading specialist.
At the elementary schools, they primarily use an extra teacher or two called impact teachers or more who work with the teacher in supporting the curriculum. And at the secondary levels, you would see the RTI process recommending support classes or group counseling those pieces. But the RTI team would then be making recommendations for one of those interventions that you're describing.
It's a team, and as opposed to student. Okay, I just had a couple of quick questions. One was just an overall question. So we have these goals and we have these metrics and we're spending money on the goals, and we don't. If we don't meet the measurements, is there a consideration of rethinking how the money's being spent if we're not producing the results?
There's always that.
Okay.
So it's always that question of we set a goal and revisiting what we did do and what was strong about that and what do we think our next step should be in attaining our goal.
If it, if the goal wasn't successful or if it even dropped or something.
If it goes either way.
And it could be for other variables or,
Sure.
And it was just number 16, 13, it went from 12, 13 to 14, 15, and I just wanted to ask what
It's
that
every
was.
other year, is that
Oh, it's the chicks?
Okay. That
Yeah, it's
explains
administered
that.
every other year.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you, Eric.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Next time you print out a beautiful thing like this, can we make it slightly bigger? It's making me feel like I need glasses.
I don't know. I might buy you glasses. Because I love the trees. All right, are we ready to move on? I hope this one to be really just a presentation, not asking for questions per se, but only clarity, because what we have here is our first look at the goals for the district for next year that we are proposing, and actions and services not delineated out in any way what the particular ones. This is the larger picture in terms of what we would like to propose. So with that, you ready? We have the proposed goals, actions, and services. What you'll see a lot, too, is a rollover of what you've seen last year. We've had some great success with lots of things that have worked very well. And even if we didn't get our goals, Ms. Beatty, it's still here again because it's important around student achievement. So in taking a look at, oh, that's not the one. Oh, yeah, it is. Oh, there it is. I wanted to remind ourselves of our mission, the college and career readiness for all students, and the district goals that we had have ensure each student engages in a challenging 21st century learning experience, develop and maintain communication systems that create collective engagement among all stakeholders, and to create a collaborative culture of continuous learning for all staff. So I think what Malaga said earlier really embraces all of this. When we take a look at all of our goals, it really is the work of all of the divisions, the board, all of our staff really working synergistically. This plan has made us do that in order to focus on all our students. So as we push forward to set priorities, large priorities, I just want us to always remember that we are preparing our students for their future, not ours. So it's really propelling our think forward. So the state has 8 priorities for Lcap. This is just a review. This has been around for a couple years, but I just wanted to remind everybody. They are actually described in your handout. I don't want to go back to that. It's on pages 1 and 2 what each one of these means. But I think what you'll see is you will see all of these 8 priorities of the Lcap enveloped in the goals that we put together. So one thing I wanted to do is just start out with some stakeholder input. So the way we are going to work this particular piece is I'm going to share with you a goal. I'm going to share with you some actions around that goal. And then I'm going to share with you some data from that goal. So I think with that, I'd like Mercedes and Eric, if you guys can just come back up, because these two were instrumental in helping to put all this together. So we have had lots and lots of data come our way. What I have here that I will, I just printed for myself right now because I'm thinking some of you might want it electronically, and anyone in the audience can have this also, is the Parent Perception Survey. This is our quantitative data. And this is the analysis of the Parent Perception Survey by Hanover. Hanover is a company that we contract with that does a lot of our data analyses, as well as will help us write surveys and stuff. They are a research-based type company. If you recall, Dr. Newman brought forward that we had somebody at all of our forums that sat there with us and listened to all the comments that we had, looked at all our comments, put together a report for us also from what the forums had shared with us. And then the other piece of data that you'll have is the student data. We ran a student survey, and what are our students saying about this? So I have this, and I have lots of other data, and I am more than happy to share that with any of you here or any of you in the audience. So this is the data that we have used to help drive our work and in terms of listening. So I think what's really important that you see here is that in all of the data pieces, we have parents and students that really love their experience here in our district, and I think that's really important for us as we move forward. That doesn't mean we're perfect. It's just that we need to continue to work together around what we're looking at. Sure.
These documents will be in the board drive tomorrow, so you can go and look at all of these documents in your shared drive. And then, as Mel said, she has other with lots of data, but these are the 4 main documents that were the most recently done and are feeding into some of these recommendations.
Thanks. And what we have too is we have a whole listing of all other kinds of data that we've been collecting, not only this year, but we have been collecting this kind of data for a long time. So Lcap asks us to do that, and we're glad we've been doing it, and we've actually broadened our input by doing forums and other kinds of things too. So I think it's been a good push for us. So before I actually even begin, I have to tell you that a note of thanks goes out to many people in this room that have been instrumental in every aspect of putting the Lcap together. What I'm going to do tonight is just recognize the technical people, and the technical people for me are the people who do the budget. Where did Joy go? Oh, Joy. So Joy has been working with us around the budget with Malaga. Okay, remind me to embarrass her when she walks back in. Eric, as you know, who has been doing all of the data work, and Mercedes, who's been really shepherding this whole project together and working with me in doing that. Everyone in this room has been a part of that, and I want to thank all of you here and beyond, because this really is a community effort.
I'd like to make sure we do special thanks also to Dr. Newman for his coordination of those forums. There were many, many people involved in making those things happen, but it was Dr. Newman who designed that and made sure that those things happened. And then Mercedes was a definite help with the one that was for our Spanish-speaking parents. But Rich put together the pieces for the community forums.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. So, in moving forward, this is kind of the structure that we need to look at. We will be sharing the proposed Lcap goals and the next level actions and services and operational actions and services. You will not see the metrics today. You will see some of the qualitative and quantitative data, and I want us to make sure that we are focusing on both qualitative and quantitative data as we think about our work. We've been involved in a lot of qualitative data, and with Eric bringing forward all of the other data, I think it's really critical to also join that together. So,
I'm sorry, but if you just go back to that last slide. I think this answers the question Ms. Beatty asked a moment ago. So through the collection of the data, whether it's qualitative, quantitative, and the metrics that we use, you see the arrows pointing back up to proposed Lcap goals. So when we get that data, we go back, we look at the goal. Do we have the right goal? But it may also not be the goal that needs to be changed. It may be the action or the operational actions and services. So we watch those metrics, and is this working? And if it's not, do we have the right goal? Or do we need to try some different actions and services, and which is having the most effect? And that's an ongoing process. Mel said at the very beginning of this evening that the Lcap is an evolving and live document, and that's how that's working.
Okay. All right. These are our goals that you will we will roll out actions and services under. Support high-quality teachers in their implementation of an articulated California standards-based curriculum instruction and assessment to ensure college and career readiness and citizenship for all students TK-12. Create systems and structures that provide multiple pathways of learning and engagement to increase college and career readiness of our students and close the achievement gaps for all subgroups. Strengthen and maintain a safe, healthy, positive, and attractive learning environment for all learners. Increase parent and student engagement in learning through enhanced community involvement in the education of our students. And to develop, implement, and embed a collaborative learning structure and system for adults and students to increase student achievement. So with that, what I'm just going to do is just share with you the goals and our actions and services. So under our first goal, and this is really a large piece of our work that keeps the structures and supports for student learning at the forefront. This is where we work with all of our learning colleagues to develop, facilitate, and plan district-wide work, TK-12. While we've had a shift in math, we've had a focus on mathematics the last couple of years. We are downshifting mathematics, and we're starting to shift up science and English language arts. That doesn't mean all the other subjects are ignored. We continue to embed the literacy standards in all of our CTE courses, PE, VAPA, etc. So that work will also continue as we move on. This is a bulk of our work, and what's critical here is working with our teachers and teacher leaders to embed and work with one another so that we can provide a rigorous academic learning environment for each of our students. As I mentioned earlier, I think from a question that was there, we have baseline data and we want to develop a multi-year plan for VAPA and physical education. We'd like to continue decreasing staffing ratios and class size. We'd like to continue the work around increasing the diversity of our staff, both certificated and classified, and the PPAP program, which tends to the high-quality teachers that we continue to bring into our program that we're very excited about. So when we think about what is the data that helps to support this, I'm not going to read all these. What I'm going to do as we go through is this is just a representation, if you will, of the data that we have, both quantitative and qualitative. If you look in the quantitative box, the first one, it says 93% of our parents surveyed in the parent perception survey agreed that the school is maintaining high academic expectations. If you look at the third bullet, 97% of our staff says the school sets high standards for academic performance for all students. So knowing that, this is an important goal for us to continue. If we look at the qualitative data, some of the support for the actions is the community forum feedback indicated a need to reduce class size. And another thing from the community forum is broadening student engagement through a variety of effective teaching practices. So you can read through the rest of that data. Just wanted to highlight a few. So in terms of creating systems and structures that provide multiple pathways of learning to increase college and career readiness, we'd like to continue our work in response to intervention, go deeper, and make sure that we broaden our support for students throughout the system. Identify and implement more effective academic support structures and interventions. Continue with the implementation of our ELD standards into our classrooms. Increasing collaborative learning opportunities through multiple environments, and continuing to complete our career technical education pathways. And if we think about the data around that, under quantitative, I'd just like to highlight that 73% of our 2014 graduates completed the A to G course requirements for entrance to CSU or UC. And if you look at the last one, that 98.7% of our seniors graduate continue on to graduate. So those are two key indicators or metrics for us that that are important to us. And looking at the qualitative data, if we look at the first one, the forum indicated the need to explore multiple learning pathways for students to meet the needs of diverse learners. And the second one, we had principals that said that we need to implement and expand response to intervention, instruction, practices, and supports district-wide. In terms of maintaining a healthy, safe, positive, attractive learning environment, we spoke to looking at PE instruction and standards. Oh, that should say TK-12. Apologies. Increase student support by the addition of counselors at schools. Strengthen school size support in discipline and attendance. Continue staff development and culture responsive learning environments, bullying prevention, social media, and drug education. Continue to maintain safe facilities and increase maintenance staffing, and provide structures and training to support students served through intervention programs. And picking a couple of things from the quantitative data, the third data from the chicks, feeling safe at school, our elementary students, 88% indicated they did, at middle school 79%, at high school 81%. And the second one, 79% of our parents surveyed agreed with the statement, my child is free from bullying or other forms of harassment. If we take a look at the qualitative data, USD Forum report indicates the district need to focus on education for the whole child. And the next one that speaks to the district advisory committees and site principals indicate a need for increased counseling support. So that's where the actions come from. In terms of increasing parent and student engagement through enhanced community involvement, we heard this quite a bit, the engagement of our students in their passions and future. Some of the things that were listed here that we heard were robotics, coding, science Olympiad, more STEAM, Project Lead the Way. Increasing participation in curricular and co-curricular programs. We're going to have to find a way to gather that data if this is a focus. Increased parent engagement in the learning initiatives that we've listed above. And continuing to explore and strengthen strategies to increase two-way communication with parents and community. So as we think about some of the data, the second bullet is 87% of the parents surveyed agreed with the statement, I am treated as a valued partner in my child's education. I think that's very important as we move forward. And the last one, 82% of our parents surveyed agreed that I would like to see more access to technology resources in the schools to support my child's learning. And in terms of the qualitative data, the first one, Hanover, from the Parent Perception Survey, communication from school and or teacher is overall strong and in some instances could be more responsive. So we'll take a look at that. And the third one, the community forum recommended schools be proactive in reaching out to families who are not comfortable speaking English. So that's some work around engagement that we're going to need to address. And with the last goal, develop, implement, and embed a collaborative learning structure and system for adults and students to increase student achievement. Again, we have listed the PPAP program, great structure for our new teachers. The TLC program that we have at the for our certificated staff to engage in their own learning pathways. Continue with PSEA professional learning program implementation that has gone underway this year. Work with SEIU to develop a staff development plan for continued growth in the profession. Continue looking at our learning management system, MyConnect, for teacher collaboration and communication with parents. And we have added the SACE, as a Special Education IEP Management Program, that we will be pushing forward this year. And also explore expanded blended technology opportunities and the flexibility for learners to access classes through multiple environments. So the data for that particular one that I'd just like to highlight is the first one. Survey data following teacher-planned and teacher-led professional growth days indicated high levels of teacher satisfaction with content and format. And the last one, which I had already highlighted earlier, is the participation in our Teacher and Learning, TLC, Teacher and Learning Cooperative. On the qualitative side, from the forum, input indicated a priority for professional learning for teachers and increased district support for building teacher capacity. And the last one, site principals have identified the continuation expansion of district teacher-led curriculum professional development planning. So with that, those are our 5 goals and the actions and services that we are recommending moving forward. And I'm going to turn this over now to Malaga, who has some operational actions and services that she would like to share with the team.
Thank you, Dr. Robertson. Dr. Collins, did you want to take a break or do you want to go into the numbers? Just go? Okay. So,
I think you were, yes. Okay. 5-minute break. Per Andy.
apologies.
Welcome. It's okay, we're good.
I was trying to be. All right, we are going to restart our meeting. Meeting of the Board of Education resumes with yeah, that goes flying and hits someone in the head. I don't think so. Okay. Thank you. And yes, back to you, Malaga.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty.
Associate Superintendent Valandi.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, again. We're going to be talking about numbers now. And yes, Mr. Zane, I am excited. So I won't keep everybody too long, just go over this quickly. So Dr. Collins, Dr. Robertson, and Ms. Hogarth give me the big ideas, and then Joy Romero, Director of Finance, and I have to find the dollars to put it to work. So that's the operational piece. And when we do this work, there are some expenses that we have to incur, and we call those the workload budget. And then we have others. The state mandate or a waiver has expired, so that's another piece. And then in addition to that, now we start incorporating the Lcap goals, such as security, safety, additional custodians, and all of those pieces. So I wanted to bring that to the attention of the board as we are developing our budget. The first page, everybody should have a handout that looks like this. It's a 3-page document. And the first page is just a snapshot of what the 2014-15 budget looks like right now as of April 13th, okay, as of April 30th. The only number that you need to know on that page is the highlighted one, which is the $14,950,000. And what that is other reserves while we close this year that have not been appropriated for any expense, okay? That's the number we have to remember from this page. Going on to the next page, these are the operational priorities. And in order to explain this, I thought I should start with the new revenues that we are projecting to get this year. Based on the May revised budget, these revenues will increase, but I did not have the time to crunch those numbers, so we are just using the numbers from the January budget today. Increase to the LCFF base grant ongoing, $14.6 million. Allocation to the deferred maintenance program, $550,000. The state has stopped funding that program, so we as a district contribute $550,000 every year in order to keep up the major expenses that could happen at our schools. Just like this year, we have pipes breaking and all of those that the board knows about. Increase to our supplement grant this year is $2.2 million. One-time mandated grant dollars, 5.8, and that is one time. So as far as the ongoing dollars, we're looking at an increase over 2014-15 of $14 million to our unrestricted general fund budget. The first lines in the expenditures section, the first 7 lines, in fact, are what is called the workload budget. So we have to budget for those as we start the new year. The first one is our step and column for all our teachers, $1.7 million. ABSM, STEP, and longevity, that's our managers, both classified and certificated, $249,000. PSEA and SEIU are classified employees. STEP and longevity, $306,000. Related fringes for these above 3 items, related fringes meaning CalPERS, CalSTRS, Medicare, unemployment, Social Security, $376,000. Health insurance increase district-wide, we are projecting an increase of 7.2% increase. That is $1.7 million. Special education program increase, $2 million. Utilities increase, $828,000. Normally, utilities will be $400,000 year over year. This year, because of the electricity rates and the water shortage, we are projecting almost double what we normally do. So a total of 7.2 of those those 7 items I just mentioned is considered the workload budget. Okay. The next priority, so our goal 1 is to decrease class sizes. We have set aside $1 million for 12.86 FTE. I guess we could call it 13 FTE. The math comes to 12.86, but it's really 13 teachers. In addition to our Lcap goals, we have to remember that as a provision for receiving LCFF dollars by 2021, our district has to show that we have a class size in grades TK through 3 of 24. So we have started making plans by budgeting that on a yearly basis. Routine, restricted, and maintenance, RRMA, that is $3.5 million. That's going to take some explanation, so I want to do that in the next page. So also savings by transferring existing expense to routine restricted. I will cover that in the next page. Assistant Director of Transportation, $130,000. Senior ISA position, that is Information System Support Analyst in our IT and testing program, testing department, $70,000. Increase our LANs, our local area network support staff who work in our IT from 10.5 months to 11 months, plus 3 days in the summer. This will help our sites as they implement new programs, set up new computers, and get the computers ready for both students and staff, $55,000. 10 custodians for our sites. That's a request from Facilities Maintenance Operations based on our Lcap forum requests from the community, $394,000. Increase hours for our data assistants 1 and 2 in the testing department, $12,000. Increase high school and middle school accounting techs, charge them to district core staffing. Right now, the district is paying 75% of those positions. We want to raise it up to $90,000 to help our sites, because otherwise our sites have to pay for that from their ASB funds. $63,000. This is something we have no choice over. Increase to the STRS and the PERS rates district-wide. Those are the retirement accounts for all our employees. $2,644,000. Athletic field trip budgets for our high schools, $50,000. From our one-time dollars, we want to buy a van for Abraxas with wheelchair lifts. We have special education students in Abraxas school, and their van is, right now, it's very, very pathetic looking. We need to, it is. If you've seen it, you'll agree. We need to buy a new one. 3 vans for the warehouse for our delivery, postal, and other supplies that we deliver to our schools, $91,000. And you will see that in the supplemental, though we are getting an increase of $2.2 million, we have not given the dollar breakdown as yet. Dr. Robertson and I will be doing that in June. So total increases in expenses of ongoing dollars, 13.8, one-time dollars of $141,000. Difference between the new revenue and new expenses, $231,000 in the ongoing and 5.7 in one time. Bringing the other reserves from the previous page highlighted in yellow, almost $15 million for a projected ending balance in 15-16 of unrestricted general fund of 15.1 in ongoing, one time 5.7, almost $21 million. Want to explain the routine restricted maintenance, and then I will take questions. So on the next page, I have a detailed explanation of the routine restricted maintenance account. This information has been put together based on input from our community forums, from the school sites, from work orders that have been coming in for repairs needed at the school sites, and of course our Director of Facilities. Just some background. Per Ed Code 17070.75, we as a school district are required to contribute 3% of total general fund expenses to fund routine restricted maintenance accounts. However, because of all the budget cuts that we have been experiencing, the state had given us a waiver. That waiver was you can contribute 1% towards RRMA. That expires June 30th, 2015. So now we do have to meet that 3% requirement. 3% increase to the routine restricted maintenance is 3.5 million. So we've taken the 3.5 million and broken it down in 3 broad categories. I won't bore you with all the details. The first category is total goods, supplies, equipment, 1.5 million. Second category is total positions, 378,000. And the third one is existing positions that used to be charged to the unrestricted general fund but qualify to be charged to the maintenance fund. And that would be 2 assistant mechanics, 6 groundsmen, custodians. We used to charge only 10% of custodians to routine restricted. Now we are going to charge 20% and charge the IT communications department to the maintenance, because in that department we have people who work with the cables, the underground systems, and California Accounting Code, accounting manual says they may be charged to maintenance accounts. So that's a savings of 1.2 million that I have brought forth into the previous page. And we have set aside 245,000 in the maintenance account in case we have other emergencies during the year. I take questions.
My understanding is the May revise today, the governor talked about, when you look at page 2, you say you have one-time mandated grants of approximately 5.8 million. The additional money is going to triple that, is if indeed the legislature accepts his proposed budget. Is that correct?
That is correct, Dr. Collins. When Ron Bennett was here last week, he shared with us that the one-time monies for school districts could be as high as $400 or $450 per ADA.
Which is about 16 million.
That is correct. That is about 16 million for our district.
And although it's one-time money, so we have to be careful that we're not creating ongoing expenses that will allow us to continue a lot of the work that you heard about tonight.
That is correct. Many of the one-time jobs can be done using that money. In addition, the May revision has stated that the LCFF base grant will also increase. So we are waiting for the formula, and then we will calculate that. So the 14.6 million is going to be higher. The ongoing money is going to be higher.
And then there's some CTE money and
yes,
all
the
that.
CTE grant money is going to be for a 3-year period. So we'll be getting monies from CTE, Career Technical Education monies. Our district will be receiving that as well.
And I think one of the things that's really important for everyone to understand is because of the long period of budget reductions, there are a lot of backlog on things that can be done with the one-time money, like instructional materials, which is sorely needed at our high schools and other places, as well as you can fund professional development. You may not be able to continue it forever, but at least you've got some money here where you can make a real concerted effort to try and move forward the plan to do some of the things here. So it's just a matter of watching what's one-time and what's ongoing, and how we expand the ongoing system that address some of these one-time needs and get the best value out of this money for our kids.
I guess, my initial reaction is it's kind of depressing that we're spending all the new money that we're getting next year. And while I agree with all of these, and especially the custodial care, I mean, that is just vital for the students' health and well-being. And the groundskeepers, I know that's been needed, and that's going to save us money, I think, in the long run when we have people, addressing the pipes and the sprinkler heads and whatever else, and especially with the drought conditions. But there's so much that's not on here, that the community members have come forward and asked for, whether it's the library technicians or the teacher technology coaches, or stipend for additional robotics, or the student support services, or books, library books that are on average 20 years old. So But one concern also is if we end up next year with a reserve of 15 million, we have the transfers in 33 million. That's a certain portion of the restricted funds, correct? And that's the underfunded mandate of the restricted funds. If it's going to be an additional 2 million next year for special education, then we're looking at maybe even higher than 33 million transfer in, negative 33 million transferring in next year. How are we going to cover it with a $15 million reserve?
That's right, Ms. Beatty. So Ms. Beatty's on page 1, and she's looking at row number 1, 2, 3, 4, where I have a line called transfers in, out, and contributions of $33 million. And Ms. Beatty is right, a major portion of that, almost 29 million of that, is our special education that we contribute to from the unrestricted general fund to the special education program. The 2 million increase that we have in the 15-16 budget, Ms. Beatty, is considered a workload budget, and we have covered that for 15-16, and after that we have a balance of 15.1 million.
So the 33 million that you transfer in is already budgeted as ongoing.
Yes.
It's not, we need new money to cover that.
No, it's budgeted. The 2 million is budgeted.
But how about
But the 2 million-
15-16's restricted deficit?
Oh, you are talking about 16-17.
Or no, 15-16. At the 15-16, the restricted always runs this multi-million-dollar deficit. So won't that be subtracted from the $15 million reserve?
The 2 million line, okay. If you look at the expenditures,
that's
yeah,
a net. You're
yes.
saying that's a net.
Exactly.
So the 15 million already incorporates that.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of our workload. And some years it's less than 2 million. Some years it's right at 2 million. So we based on trends and analysis, we budget 2 million for program increase in special education.
I just have a question about those health insurance increases. 7.2, is that high? Is that regular? Are you being ultra conservative here? Or?
I'm being right on.
Are you really? That's disheartening. That seems really
okay,
high.
That's a good question. What it is for the last 5 years, it's been between 5% and 6%. Okay. Prior to that, we've had years when it's been higher. So in order to be safe, I budget 7.2, and if it comes lower, we recognize the savings in January. Okay. It is high. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have one, Malaga.
Okay.
A comment. So basically, we ran a $15 million deficit for the current year, and it brought our reserves down to 30 million, about half of which are unappropriated. Mm-hmm. And you've projected essentially 14 million in new money, all of which gets spent. So our unappropriated surplus remains the same at about 15 million. So we've got about 15 million mandated, about 15 million surplus, right?
Correct.
In terms of allocating these expenditures, what was the methodology? I noticed we get 12.86 teachers now for $1 million. It was 14 point something last year, 14.3. But I'm looking at the expenditures for compensation, and in just those three, it looks like out of the total, about 80% of it goes to PFT. And the rest of it, about 20%, goes to APSM and PSEA. Okay, I'm just looking at this generically with a fair share, quote unquote, that's 56 point blah 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 percent. That seems a little skewed, particularly in light of how many employees are comprised by PSEA and APSM. Where did those numbers come from?
So the first, okay, Mr. Sellers, the first 7 items are workload, so we really do not have any choice over there. The 8th item, which is the 13 teacher FTE, that's linked to goal number 1. The other 2 I have explained about the routine restricted maintenance. The assistant director of transportation, we're able to fund that because of the savings we generated by transferring the 2 mechanics to the routine restricted maintenance. In prior years, those 2 mechanics were charged to transportation. That would be the supporting dollars why we have that position listed. The senior ISA, the lands, they're all PSEA positions. These arose from the sites and the departments asking for these. When these requests come repeatedly to the district office and to cabinet as well as to the department heads, they are listed on a priority sheet, and then we consider them. At this point, we are not looking at the fair share percentage or the true-up percentages or anything like that. This is based purely on needs, prioritized by what the principals tell us or what the classified employees tell us or what we know is happening at the school sites. Sometimes the LSS department, the Learning Support Services, they will give us information that the lands need to be, their work year needs to be extended. We cannot get the computers ready for the school sites when they open. And then the 10 custodians, yes, everybody knows we need that. Increasing hours for the data assistant, that request came from our district office. High school and middle school accounting technician, that came from the school site. And then the rest of it, the STIRS, PERS, we have no choice.
And I understand all that. I didn't need you to go through the laundry list. I see the positions. What I'm trying to figure out is those first 3 lines, which are the step-in and longevity increases. 80% of it is going to the certificated staff. Why is that?
Well, because almost majority of our staff is certificated. We have more teachers than all of us put together.
That's not correct.
It is not correct.
Well, PFT membership is about 1,600, and PSCA and SEIU is about 1,800 combined.
Okay, so I think I'll let Tracy answer that question.
Right. Most of the Poway Federation of Teachers employees, PFT employees, are full-time employees. Many of the SEIU, PSCA employees are part-time employees, which also count as one, even if they were a 50% employee. The first items that Malaga are speaking to, those are not new. Those are step and column are what classified and certificated move in every year, depending upon their years of service and their time in the district. Longevity is not new money. Certain units attain longevity based upon their years of service, and they move at that same time.
So you're saying that it's essentially the compensation structure within the units and how many people are projected to advance
Exactly.
and absorb that much money.
Exactly.
But relationship still 80-20. Am I correct?
I don't know that to be.
I'm doing it on the top of my head. But
That's just because the pay scale. They bump up.
It isn't anything that we had just created. It is a process that we use for advancement on the salary scale for classified and certificated units.
okay. Thank you.
Malika, just one quick question on page 3, the total cost for total positions. Is it fully loaded or is that just salary?
That would be salary plus benefits plus health insurance. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just one with STIRS and the PERS. So percent, do you know, do you happen to know what the percentages come out to? It's a
Yes.
steep, and that's just the increase for 15-16.
Yes. The question was, is that just the increase for 15-16? The answer is yes. PERS was 11.771, and it's going to increase to 11.847. STIRS was 8.88, and it's going to increase to 10.73. Yes. So that's a district cost.
One of the things, we joined a coalition that school services started, which is trying to get some legislation to talk to the governor and the state legislature to say that whatever these increases are that have been projected for SERS and PERS, the shortfall of the funding, that it would make more sense to allocate that out-of-state dollars before you do your Prop 98. And so that way it's not an impact on the district. Now, we wouldn't get the dollars because they're going there, but it would be proportionately and easier to manage if the state would just fund those increases that they say they need to have before they determine what's going to go in Prop 98. Even though it would lower the amount available for Prop 98, it would make more sense to do it that way than. So I don't know how well that's going up there, but I know it's getting some momentum.
Well, I just heard today that we joined the coalition. 160 school districts have joined the coalition. Coalition knows of no active opposition to this proposal. However, the powerful CTA Association has not taken a position. Yeah.
That's not her.
Maybe you could tell CTA. Yes, they have not taken any position on that, so it's not moving forward yet.
I'm not surprised.
Yes.
And if we may get our own information, but if you have any information you want to pass on to the board as we have visits or encounters with state representatives, we can carry the message.
I will send to you, Ms. Beatty.
Thank you.
Yeah. And the other part that we have to remember with the CASTers and CalPERS, the liability for the state is so high. What they are thinking of doing starting this year, they are trying to push through ASB 68, which the school districts would have to recognize the liability when we, after we close our books and the auditors write up our accounting statements, which will have a negative impact on our finances. It will look like our liabilities are higher than they are. And our community members are questioning why is our net asset position going down. It's because of reasons like this. So it's very, if you could do something to fight that, that would be good too.
Can you just repeat the first part?
The first part is ASB 68 goes into effect this year. So if the state of California has a debt of, say, $40 million to the CalSTRS and $30 million to CalPERS, they're going to take that and allocate it to the different districts they have in California, 999 school districts, and they're going to tell us, Poway, book 10 million or 5 million. So that's going to be negative effect on our books. And then I'm trying to explain to the community members why our assets are going down.
And this was because of the late 1990s, 1998 decision of the state legislature when they were flushed with cash to increase benefits and decrease contributions, which caused a STRS deficit of about $70 million, and now they're making a school district pay.
That is right.
For the record.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, no more questions. Thank you.
May I ask one question before?
Yes, please.
Is it all right to incorporate these changes into the budget, into 15-16 budget as we move forward? And the reason I'm asking is because we are looking at a month's worth of work to get state software done. So I need direction.
So you're looking for an action that would implement this proposal?
I don't know if it is an action item. It is not an action item. Yes, I will bring the budget back to the board. Yeah, thank you.
So what are, so you're.
We have to meet back. It's not an action item.
You're not approving anything.
Okay.
All right, so I'm going to go over our next step, and I just realized, because today's Thursday, May 14th, I thought that was really the date that I needed to put. So on Monday, you will see first read and public comment on goals, actions, and services that you saw tonight. So
Okay.
That will come exactly as is. On Monday, June 15th, what you will see is the goals, actions, and services with budget allocations. And that's the second read on the adoption of goals, actions, and services. On Monday, June 22nd, we'll have a second read and adoption of the goals, actions, and services as well as operational services. And June 30th, we have to submit our adopted Lcap plan and district budget to the San Diego County Office of Education. So that is the timeline from here until June 30th in all those board meetings. And so we know that there are going to be discussions around priorities. So we're hoping that we do have shared priorities, and then looking for how do we build our priorities together. And I'm hoping that the priorities are big so that we can figure out what are the structures underneath to make their reality. So with that, Ms. Beatty, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, and I don't know if it's a bit of a case of the cart before the horse. So our next agenda item is what the California School Board Association says is the essential role of the school board member and the board governing body, and that is to set the district's strategic vision, goals, and priorities, as well as establishing the budget priorities. So that if we end up going with the operational priorities as were presented, it may be somewhat of an educational exercise. We don't get more monies in the budget, but it still is extremely worthwhile, since this is our most important function, to establish the strategic priorities of the district, the budget priorities and goals, and usually that's then encapsulated in a plan that's further implemented by our employee superintendent. So members of the public don't know that what I decided to do, and this was just sort of my creative thinking based on the way we've done some voting for various delegates and board appointees, was I asked my fellow board members to create their top 5 priorities and then their second 5 priorities. I'm going to pass mine down and we can all share ours. And these are fluid, so we can discuss, debate, and this is for next year. The goals and priority setting that the governing body can normally do can be from 1 to 20 years, but I decided to just keep this year, and this is work we started to do our board conversation meeting on January 7th, but with a brand new board majority, we focused mostly on protocols, rules of the road, and then some tactical priorities, and that was things like discussing how we wanted to do board meetings, and probably the biggest discussion was around the creation of the advisory committees. So, and that came to fruition after much time and effort.
Lady, may I make a request?
Oh, yes.
Since there was a request of all board members to bring priorities, would it be okay with the board if we actually scribe them for everybody so everyone can see them in the room? Like you would say what your 5 are and we could write them down?
Sure. I've got a couple. I didn't make copies. I've got 2. I can.
Yeah, so I think we have some easels that we can, so I'm wondering if that's okay with everybody, and so we can write what everyone's bringing forward so everyone can see.
Okay, that would be wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for suggesting that. Do you have priority, or would you going to do it on the line? We could go 1 down the line, 1, 1, 1, and then. That's fine. Well, if they're gonna, I mean, they're fluid, so it can be changed. You can just pick it up now.
I'm going to put them up.
I've got one more. Actually. Wow, this is great. It's like a production. Okay.
Love this.
Yeah, this is wonderful. This is really exciting. Thank you. How many teachers does it know?
So the challenger will be, you each have your priorities. We need to leave here with what are the board priorities.
Correct.
And
yes.
so
it's the consensus.
Perhaps it's a matter of, throwing out one of the priorities. For example, Ms. Bay, if I may, your first one, the K-12 class size reduction. So then discussion. Is that a priority of this board?
Great.
Meaning 3 or more of the board members. Is that a high priority? Given what you've seen, the data, somewhat of it, and you've been at those forums, and you've seen what Mel presented tonight, as well as the Lcap plan, which was adopted by the board last year, that we're still, and the 3 board goals. So of all of that, it's a matter of coming to some form of consensus that, yes, these are priorities of the board.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. We're a consensus body, so we speak as a majority.
Can I make another suggested way of going about this is consider from a starting point perhaps the recommendations, the goals that were just presented to us. If there are no goals or priorities, or rather, if we have some goals and priorities of our own that were not included in the goals and priorities that were just presented to us, maybe just articulate those. Otherwise, we're going to be repeating something over and over unnecessarily, already included in current goals and priorities.
Well, except the one that were recommended to us are recommendations, and we still have to approve those recommendations. So,
I guess, in other words, we'd be saying by default is we agree with the goals and priorities that were presented, or we don't. Maybe there's a couple that we don't. But just say for the conversation here that we do, by the way, these are some other ones that we may want to have included as a goal priority, as opposed to just starting from scratch with all of our own goal priorities.
I'm not sure I follow that.
Well,
and I want to say, so you can explain that to me again. Sure. But I would also ask that if there's a priority, if a board member says, I want to hire an in-house attorney as on here, as a second priority, I'm going to push back and say, why? What is the goal you're trying to accomplish? What is the purpose of that? The board's job is to set the goals, like we want to do something, and then the staff will say, okay, how do we get there? What would it take? There may be other ways to get there other than doing that particular action. Does that
Yeah,
make some sense?
it makes sense.
We're
It makes
trying to
sense.
keep it 30,000 foot level.
Exactly.
What is it you want to accomplish?
Let me explain a little bit better. I hope what I was trying to say to begin with is, I had written down 5 priorities or goals I had in mind. They were kind of high-level goals, not very specific. Was a little reluctant to share them at the outset because it felt as though until I get a presentation on LCAP and hear the goals and priorities that's articulated by the cabinet, I wanted to see how much they were in sync. So what I was doing during all presentations was going through my 5 bullet points here and making, oh, look at that. That actually coincides with goal number 6 on the LCAP already. So there's only one of the 5 here on my list that was not in any of the goals, at least as I heard them presented this evening. So instead of me articulating 4 of 5 that were already presented, I would just throw out one that wasn't.
I think it's important to hear all 5.
Okay.
Because we're all independently elected to represent our constituents' interests. And
I'll repeat them
by our
because
fiduciary duty to
what I'll do is I'll
student-
repeat them out loud, and then where I saw they already overlap with the existing LCAP.
Yeah, and it's as part of a consensus building.
Sure.
I think it's important to hear all 5 of them. So. Thank you, Noreen, Kimberly. This is wonderful. Should we go ahead and start? I think we could start talking. And yours. Yeah, we only have ours. Teaching Michelle. Want to give yours up?
Not really. Look at mine. It's on now.
Put out there. As opposed to. We have 2. Yeah.
Fine, I'm happy to go with disposable. We'll easily fund 5.
Okay. Well, okay, I'll start with the first one, the one that was cited, K-12 size reduction. So we do have budgeted the $1 million, and that is for K through 5. And I'd like to see more aggressive restoration. I did my own research and looking at, from California State Department of Education, looking at 5-year span from 2007-8 to 2012-13. That was when the most recent data was for, or it was 13-14. And 8, 9, 8. Anyway, we had in 13-14 143 fewer teachers and 1,900 and change more students. And so if we're allocating only $1 million, that's about 10% of what we need to restore, 10% of the students of what we need to get back to where we were 6 years ago. So it'd be nice to get some of the middle and high school classes down further. I know it's been a big improvement, but improvement from 45 to 50, a long way to go to get it back to, some of our introductory English classes, 9th grade English classes down to 18, which they were in 2008. So that's, I just wanted more than $1 million put towards class size reduction. Any thoughts on that?
Are these your priorities in order of priority?
I tried. It was difficult, but I did try. Yeah.
I did. Good job. Class size reduction would be lovely, but to me, there are higher priorities for me.
Okay, what?
You want me to name off some of the things on my list?
That's higher than class size? Sure.
Well, I think there are a lot of things that will be a greater impact on kids. I'd like to hire some more teachers for class size reduction purposes, but I also like to hire our music PE teachers. Sounds like we may have a 16-17 implementation plan coming for that. I'm impatient. I don't want to wait that long, but if I have to, I will. I'd like to get that sooner rather than later.
Music PE for elementary school or for all?
Yeah, and my interest there is schools are receiving little in district funding for these things that are very important and sometimes legally required, in fact. It'd be nice to be able to reduce our reliance on parent volunteers and fundraising and school-side inequities as well. So I think that's important, and I think we talked about that when we talked about the LCAP. But we won't be getting next year at this point, at least in what was presented. That sounds like, I think Mel said 16, 17 for that. I think that's a priority to me. I would like to do something sooner. Maybe not get the whole thing done, but move forward a little faster with that. To me, I think the librarians, library tech, that would be great. I want to make libraries so that students can get the most time. I'm trying to phrase it as a higher level goal so that staff can decide how to make these things happen. But so students can get the most out of those potentially really amazing resources that are on every campus. And again, so we can reduce our reliance on parent volunteers and fundraising constantly for those things. Perhaps creating an IBPS-style committee on libraries to really study what goes on at all libraries in the district. It'd be great to have the kind of data that is provided by RB High School Friend of the Library for all of district libraries. What should ideally be happening to best serve the students, and how do we get to that point? I think a group like that has maybe our classified and certificated groups who work in libraries working together would be ideal to get that kind of data, really do what needs to be done to make libraries whole and usable and fantastic. I have a lot of ideas on libraries, but again, I think the high level goal is just to make them the best resource they can be. And I think we need better staffing for that. I think we need some more study on what other things would be necessary there. So that's important to me. Those computer resource assistants, I think we have a lot of increased computer testing, keyboarding requirements, technology emphasis in schools. Seems like we need to have supports in place for that. I don't know if that's what the lands are. I'm not super techy. That's already in the goals, but I don't know if that's the same thing.
It's a different position.
Okay, well, again, and I'm spitballing here. I think right from the get-go here, I want to set my priorities. I would like for them to be informed by input from those community forums, the student and parent surveys, employee groups, staff recommendations. But we didn't have any of that when I was writing these out earlier. So I anticipated changing these almost entirely, perhaps, after what I heard tonight. I haven't had a chance to let it sink in, really.
And we have some time, obviously. But one of the things that I would ask them, Michelle, I would ask you, so why do you want to do those things? Because you want to increase support staff at the elementary level and increase support services, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
And then my question would be, at a given elementary school, where we have a staff and a principal, do they get to decide?
I'm not sure always, because there's a real lack of parity in the district, particularly at the elementary school level, because some schools are able to fundraise a lot more than others.
Right.
And I don't like to see the huge discrepancy depending on where you live. I would like to have a base level, this is good stuff that all students should be getting. I don't want to rely on parents to make sure that the kids get it across the district. And I think a lot of what's going on at the elementary school is very different depending on what school you're
You want to incorporate more into the core staffing that is the baseline.
That would be ideal to me. I'd like to see a little more parity across the elementary school offerings so that all kids are getting a base. So that, so that we don't hear these stories about how schools are struggling to pay for a music teacher. And we're not going to have that this year. Sorry. I hate that. I don't want to hear those stories. I want every school to have that minimum base thing. We know our parent volunteer art teacher graduated. Her child is in 6th grade now, so we don't get any art this year. I don't like those stories. I think it's important to have some baseline across the district.
And there are different ways to get there.
Yes, absolutely.
Be staffing,
so
could
like
be
I said,
programs.
I'm trying to go a little bit higher level and having trouble articulating it off the top of my head after seeing some of the ideas. Anyway,
I don't disagree with at all with what you want. I mean, it's what we all want, obviously. It's a matter of prioritizing and saying, how do we get there? How do we get there in a way that would be cost-effective? And it's going to have to be over time because this money is slowly coming back. And how we going to... One of the things that I've said to staff often, and it's one of the things I'd like the board to think about, as the dollars come back, we may not want to spend them the way we used to spend them. So we need to be really thinking about how we, using my little mantra, but how do we do business? There are different ways to do that, to accomplish the same goal. I see a lot of that going on out there in our elementary schools. Our principals and our teachers are trying different things. What is the role of our classified staff? Could they be doing more that might change? Maybe it's not just about getting back to the same number of teachers. Maybe we'll never get back to that ratio. Maybe there's a different career ladder for teachers to go into, and what we're doing with impact teachers. And I think we've got to get pretty creative there because the money's not going to be back where it was.
And I'm willing to stay out of that.
Yeah. Good.
I'll leave it to you.
But yes, I'm hearing what you want to see accomplished.
Yeah.
And if it's all towards what we talked about in our goals, which is personalized learning for every student, right?
Yes, I guess I would like to see a little bit more specific emphasis on some things I don't see in there.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, we've got some common ground because I have the library techs. If we get one more, we got a consensus. So, do we have another library tech?
Well, I'm going to interject here because I don't have 5 budget priorities. After 19 years, in the district, I'm more accustomed all those years when we had something like budget priorities for the board due. We got all the input from the staff. We got input from Gallagher Department, we got input from PFT, we got input from PSEA, SEIU, all the organizations kept down because when we were tight with the budgets, everybody had to be involved because the cuts were there. I mean, you had to make the cuts. Right now, I have no information for any of the staff, and my feeling is that's what we hired excellent staff for. Come up with some recommendation, what will make their departments better, what will make the schools function better, what will make the classified areas better. What are some of the recommendations from PSEA? What do they think are the highest budget priorities? If I had to look at all the budget priorities from all the organizations, I could formulate and then discuss with my fellow board members, I feel, and weed out the ones that we feel are the least important and prioritize those things that they think will affect our educational system and what's best for kids. I think my number one priority is what's best for students. If it makes the students better, affects them, improves students, I'm fine with it. But when we come into this, I don't know if this is a lesson in futility or what. I've gone through this process the last 19 years, papers, things written on the board. We've even had trains, we've had boats, we've had all kinds. People who've been around here a long time know what I'm talking about. We've had all the charts. That's fine. But we've always had the input from the people it affects, which is the staff. Now, I don't know what Alec is doing in her budget, for example, as far as crunching the numbers, what's available, what's going to be available. We can only guess on that. But then when we come to the elementary level, I like to hear from the elementary principals or the teachers in the elementary area. I have my own biases. I like to see, for example, a vice principal in all the elementary schools. Is that a high priority? I don't know if the teachers would like that. Or would they like a reading teacher? Or would they like a counselor? Would they like more books? Whatever they like. But I haven't seen any of that. It'd be nice to have those written up, compare, look at them, and the board discuss those priorities and then formulate our own priorities from that. Then we have the input from the district. Because right now, I'm like in a vacuum. I don't know what they want. And if we get money we're going to put back or we're going to spend money, it'd be nice to know what the staff need, what their needs are. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm here to serve for the staff to meet their needs so that they can meet the needs of the students. And as far as I'm concerned, the needs of the students are priority number one. So that's where I'm in a quandary. I can come up with 10 priorities of my own, but is it going to meet the needs of the staff? I don't know, because I haven't seen anything. And usually at this time when we talk about budget priority, because you hit me on a blank side, when you said, okay, formulate these things, because I'm used to getting all this information from the different groups, and we haven't got anything from them yet. And even the recommendations from superintendent, we don't have any recommendations. I haven't seen anything, and I thought that, well, our job, my personal feeling, my job is to take the advice of staff that has qualifications, they have the experience, they know what they're doing. I mean, they better know what they're doing. We're one of the best districts in the state. I keep hearing that. We're there for a reason, and I know I didn't do it. I don't think the foreign board did, because we got all this information from the various groups, and then we filtered it out and took the best recommendation, made a realistic view of what we wanted, what we want to do, what we want to accomplish, and we went for it. And then we could see the pros and cons. We can't do it. We don't have the money. Okay, prioritize. What would be the best thing? What would be the first thing? Do we need a counselor in every elementary school because we have such a problem with suicide rate or whatever it might be? What's the problem? But I don't have any of that information. I'm sorry. I can come up with a lot of priorities of my own, but I don't see them. I can't second guess and meet the needs of the staff. Anyway, that's where I'm coming from.
I would add that, after 40 years of a certain system for spending money, the state overhauled that system with a new local control accountability plan. And actually, by law, students, let alone parents and community members and other stakeholders, students are by law required to have input in the plan. With regard, I think you bring up some very good points, and I think that's what Mel had mentioned, those reports that we're going to be, that are on a shared drive. So, this is a starting point, and it's partly because we were looking at trying to inform some priorities for next year. And we're, under a time crunch because of requirements to go out and hire new staff if need be. You're right, we don't have all the input from the stakeholders. And so in that sense, this is going to be an ongoing process. The board determining strategic vision and goals, maybe to have a significant impact for next year. Conceivably, it's late in the game. So this can be an ongoing, or it's intended to be an ongoing process, every month, every other month. In order to formulate these as we get that input. I've seen the Innovation U results. The Innovation U is from staff district-wide, and clearly all of us around the community. And we've seen some of these, last year and the year before. We've seen the surveys, the Lcap surveys from last year. We saw the DAC and DELAC. DAC and DELAC wanted to restore a lot of programs that Michelle mentioned, things that are done by parent volunteers, and they wanted to bring staff back. And DAC last number one priority was class size reduction. So some of this can be informed by last year's goals that we reviewed, and that also that we just went over now. So,
well, I understand that, and I understand everyone's needs here to the goals here. But what I can't understand, how are we going to say we need consensus on if we can agree tonight on 5 priorities among us, or when you say, okay, Michelle agrees with you as far as we need in say, libraries or whatever, say, well, I don't know if that's a top priority or not. I agree we need some work in there and the library needs help. I agree. I agree with all of these things. But as far as setting a priority and spending money, I'd like to hear from the individuals involved. Okay, we decide we're going to give all the money, we're going to give all the budget money to the libraries, improve your libraries. Is that the best thing for our district? Do they need it? Sure, I think they want it because it'll improve their job and improve what's happening for the kids. But right now, the priorities we have, I'd like to see even if we give the list that you have created or we create, give it to the organization and say, okay, you prioritize what you feel is your need on our list that we're giving you. What do you think is a high priority? I can't second guess them. I'm sorry. That's just my strong feel. That's where I'm coming from.
The librarians have been a very vocal group. They've been here on a number of occasions with their reports, and in fact, Michelle referred to an email. I actually have it right here with all the data that the Friends of the Library at RB who were very active.
Well, they delivered it to us at a board meeting a couple months ago.
That's right. That's right. Charles, you want to say?
We mentioned previous Lcap and class size reduction. I want to try to interject a little reality into that conversation. There was a significant discussion in our labor negotiations that were just concluded. I mean, basically, we offered to hire 100 new teachers. That wasn't what PFT wanted. They wanted compensation adjustments, and so that's what they were given. And so I'm perfectly comfortable with the pace that they have accepted. $1 million a year, that's the staff restoration for class size reduction. That seems to be what they're comfortable with. That's certainly what they chose to apply, at least for this coming year, based upon the compensation adjustments that we had posed. So I don't, and I think teachers told us what their priority is for class size reduction.
Well, I guess here's where I would beg to differ. Took a constitutional oath, and that oath was to carry out our fiduciary duty. And guess what? That fiduciary duty is to 2 entities: kids and the taxpayers. That's it. The kid and the taxpayers. So that's our fiduciary trust as trustees.
Well, the teachers keep telling us they know best when it comes to the kids, so I'm willing to let that stand. The other is with regard to the taxpayers. Again, we have to, as Andy says, let our decisions be informed by the people who are going to utilize the resources. And so I think in terms of class size reduction, as far as I'm concerned, that's pretty well been settled. I mean, I think everyone said their piece and it hashed out the way it did, and I'm comfortable with that.
I thought it was state mandated that we contribute so much money per year for class size reduction. Not the teachers. I mean, isn't it true?
We have to be at 24:1 by 2021.
So we already have the mandate, and we don't have a choice. That's a built-in priority, and that's what we have to do. It's not the teacher. I don't think the teacher mandate or teacher choice. I think even the research, and we heard that from Ron Bennett, that it isn't hiring a lot of teachers is going to make it improve or class size reduction. It's if we have educated, well-informed, well-trained teachers, that's going to provide results, and that's going to benefit our kids. And as far as I'm concerned, if it benefits kids, that's what we go for.
And let me use it as an example. When the state first implemented the K-3 20-1, it came down from Sacramento because that was one of the first years, and somebody said, well, we should just lower all class sizes at kindergarten through 3rd grade. And somebody, the legislature, decided 20-1. That's it. Everybody has to be at 20-1. There was no local control over that. And we scrambled and we bought reloads and we hired teachers and we trained teachers and we got everybody right 20-1, and you couldn't put that 21st kid in any one of those rooms. Now we're being told those same dollars that you used to get for that, you have local control, and either you work with your exclusive bargaining rep for teachers and come up with a plan how you want to spend it to reduce K-3 class size, or if you can't come up with that agreement, then they will enforce the 24-1. Everybody will be the same. That's why we had a joint committee of teachers and administrators and staff saying, where do we think the biggest priority is? And their recommendations are, well, let's do this year. It's not going to get everybody to 24-1, and it may end up at kindergarten going to always be a little bit smaller than 2nd grade. I don't know. I've got a report from a committee. Cameron's worked with Kelly, and they did a lot of work on that. So trying to implement the recommendations and say, you're right, That's a pot of money that we are somewhat restricted in how we spend it, but we have a little more control than we ever had before. Before it was just 21. And I remember when we did that saying to the then superintendent, you know, if we had some flexibility, we might be able to get those 35 kids in 5th grade down a little bit too. And maybe if the teachers were able to do that and make those decisions and make some recommendations, we could jointly agree that it doesn't all have to be 24 to 1. Maybe 24 is a great number at 3rd grade, but maybe or maybe it should be, maybe it could be 25. Maybe it could be 26. So kindergarten can be 22. Those are the kinds of things that we need to work together on, and where we now have some control that we haven't had before. So that's my little pitch on that particular thing about being told what to do. Now, beyond that, are our classes still too big at the secondary? Absolutely. But you see how expensive it is. 13 teachers for class size reduction. That's not going to go very far. That's $1 million. Buys 13 teachers. And you said we're down how many?
143. Well, now it's probably less than that, because this went to 13, 14 last full year, and I think Molly said we add 19 FTE in 14, 15.
We added 23.
23 total. So it's 23. So it'd be 120 fewer teachers, but then again we have 3,200 more students. So, but 1 million. I mean, 1 million is a third of 1% of our total budget. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. I mean, if you're serious about class size reduction, we got to put more than 1 million. That said, it doesn't seem like there's consensus, so I'm willing to move on to, well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, on that point, notwithstanding the valuable information Dr. Collins just shared, my fear is that we're going to go way off track in several different directions here, and just focus on the process of item CO2 on the agenda, C102 on the agenda. I share some of the concerns of Michelle and Andy. The reason for my reluctance to give my priorities without the additional feedback. I do think that perhaps, in the interest of time, it'd be best if we just, for those of us who have them, and we're willing to share them, well, we've already shared, our 5 priorities to have, hate to be put back on Al. You've done so much of this work in compiling this LCAP data. I feel this is another separate forum. Let's list out all our items. Ask if Mel can go back and see where our top priorities are overlapping, or if they fall under umbrella, similar umbrella, and bring that back at the board meeting, because we still have a first reading, which we could do, and make changes in time for the second reading.
You're absolutely right. And you mentioned overlap, and I was thinking concentric circles, you know, so yeah.
So can I get a little clarity? What we didn't do and what we presented tonight was to do some of the detail that I'm seeing here. This was really around our priority being large. So if there's a large priority around I don't know, visual and performing art, PE at all elementary schools, that's a big priority. That takes some work. How do you fit that in the instruction? Who do you hire? That is not an overnight kind of, we hire them and they do. We have to do it well, and we have to make sure we staff it well, which is why I understand your impatience, because I think our students need it now also, but I also understand that we have to all work together around how it works well in schools to serve our students. So that's my challenge with some of this. I can see that fitting in, but we also have to work together around what is the larger plan to make it fit in. And that's why really soliciting expertise of people at the elementary level. They know what they do best. How do we fit in the 200 minutes every 10 days at each grade level? So it's a fluid piece throughout. We don't want to just dump it. At least I don't. But we have some really helpful people that can do that. And I don't know, maybe we could have by semester. I don't know. So I can surely do that. It's just that these are not bigger directions, I guess, what I'm saying. And what I haven't done is really flowed out any details, because I don't mind, the one I'm presenting. I looked at where we were, what we pushed forward. We looked at all the form data. I mean, that was a lot to merge just to get to where that was.
But I guess there's a question with that, though. I mean, expenditures are detailed. I mean, we've got a van for practice. We've got some land, some, groundskeeper. I mean, this is very specific line item stuff. So
we haven't done any. What will typically happen is we will put in. So let's take the curricular piece. One of the the goals was around the implementation of the standards. So there's a lot of work in there. So what we'll do is we will work with the leadership of PFT, and we will put plans together. What is the long-term plan? What will the cost be around? I don't know if we have like elementary leaders come forward to help us with that work, and then we'll go to Malaga for this is our projected budget for that. Then at that point, we can start talking about the details. So what we need is, this is a big picture thing, and yes, we agree with that, and we can start moving forward with what does that actually look like.
But when you talk about that leadership work, does that end up with a line item, say, PE teacher at every school? Because if so, it looks like all the money is already allocated, at least for next year. So how?
Well, what we'll do is we'll propose budget with all of that with a plan. So our first look at the budget with the LCAP plan, if we indeed move forward with these particular goals and actions, will be on July 15th. And so you'll actually see allocations that have been attached to each one of those, and we can probably give you a higher level plan, not to the exact detail, and that's the work that we have to progress moving into the next
I'm
year.
just talking about the finances. I mean, is there money to spend on the plans you want to add? Because here it looks like all the money's already allocated, so where does the money come from for the LCAP plans?
Ms. Bay, we have $15 million left over in 15-16 that is unappropriated, so no expenses tied to it. We are also expecting one-time monies and additional LCAP monies from the mid-revision budget.
Okay.
So I will be able to bring those actual numbers once the formulas are all done for the district level, and then put the plan together.
I think one of the confusing things with this document is this issue about state mandates. So we've had this waiver for 4 or 5 years that we didn't have to meet our 3% routine restricted maintenance. All of a sudden, starting next year, we got to throw $3.5 million into routine restricted maintenance, and that's not a choice. How we use that money in routine restricted maintenance, we have more control over than we've had before. And by using that money the way Mala has allocated it, it's allowed some of these other things to happen. That brought in another $1.3 million into this budget by how she allocated that 3.5. The nice thing is the 3.5 now, we're back to our 3%. It's in the budget from now on. So next year, what are we going to do if we get $3.5 million that we can do for ongoing? This year, we had to put it into routine restricted minutes. We didn't have a choice. So but now it's there. It won't be a new expense any year going forward. And that's the way it's hard to see this. What's ongoing expense, what's one-time expense. And sometimes, if you know you're going to have this one-time money, but you know you're going to have it 3 or 4 years, you might start thinking about it a little bit. Is it really one-time or not? Or can we do some things that may take 2 or 3 or 4 years to get done? So it's not an easy process, to say the least. And it's not that anybody's priorities here. We all have the same priorities. It's just what matter, what order they fall in, and how can we manage it, knowing that what we do have is a mandate to implement the California state standards, to implement California testing. And I think this group's done a pretty phenomenal job of thinking about, you got to think about what the state requires, how you're going to plan it, how you got to budget for it, and we still have yet to then turn it over and let the sites do their magic and make it happen in the classroom, and hopefully working together. So, I don't.
Okay, I just want to get back on track then with just a little bit of consensus building, since Kimberly and Nori have taken the time to put these posters on the wall. So we had mentioned library text. I'm just going to finish up with that. Is there any other thought from anyone? I know that was a priority of mine and of Michelle's.
Well, certainly support. I don't know about hiring additional library techs because I don't know about the staffing. I know that it's different at the high school and middle school. And
to get the information.
Yeah, and I think certainly, the library techs are all, classified employees. I'm sure the BSCA has an idea about how many they need. I know they need some hour restoration because they worked at 6 years ago from 30 down to 20. And so you have some kids who go to the library every other week because of the size of the school. So, yes, I certainly support that.
Yeah, I hate to postpone fixing libraries to use them to their the best they can be, but I think the idea of getting a group together, and some of the librarians are certificated as well, getting both of those groups together to talk about what is going on in libraries already, and some of those best practices, best staffing levels. What do the librarians do? What do the library techs do? How many hours are they working? That kind of a study, I think, would really inform what we do here.
We can't just
I'm patient. I want to do something, but having more information would be better. It could be more effective with allocating those resources.
At the same time, right?
We're not libraries.
We can take a baseline in 2008. I mean, we did this with staff salaries. Baseline was to get staff back to 2008 levels, which they were restored 2 years ago. So why not get class sizes? Library staff, custodial staff. I mean, that could be a goal in and of itself. Just restore them to their levels of 2008.
But that's not prioritizing. At that point, we know we want to get all of that back. But
what I'm saying, if you're trying to figure out how many librarians, the starting point is to restore what we once had. I mean, that would be bare minimum because we now have several thousand more students than we did 6 years ago.
But the library may have changed quite significantly in 6 years as well. And I think
important
looking into what we need them to be doing in library is also important to making a decision like this. I think library is on my list at a high level.
I agree.
I don't know what to do with them, but I know that they need some work.
And I think you bring up a really good point. Where we were at 7, 8, and the kids that are coming to us, into our libraries and to our classrooms, are different. And the real question is how are we serving their needs as they continue on in our system? And it might not look the same. I mean, I think about all the whole digital world they're moving into. We have a need for a different kind of support for our students that are coming. They're a different expertise, and we need to continue to think about that pushing forward, as well as how we support classrooms, the students that are coming to us differently. How are we creating different pathways for students? I mean, those are the kinds of conversations that we continuously have and need to have as we continue to create this future kind of a school as our kids are progressing with us. So we have to continuously think, I think, in that mode, and it might look different or it might not. Don't know. But we have a lot of smart people who can think about that.
I guess we want more information on, we're interested in more
But I
information
think
on how
fixed
to fill the
libraries
need.
is a nice high level.
Okay, fixed library, no?
Too high level, too non-specific. Good.
Well, so I would call that something around how do we facilitate resources for our students, the learners that are coming to our libraries, to collaborate with one another, to work in the real world. How are they connecting with other people in other countries and other students? Do we need a high need for having lots of books? Maybe there's a good hybrid around that. I think those are kinds of the critical questions that we need to continuously think about. And maybe our libraries are open at night for the community. I don't know, but how do we best serve our students, especially students who don't have access to the internet? How are we there for them to make sure that they have that and they have that same opportunity as the student who can sit at home and have that with them? Those are critical questions around focusing students and how do we support them?
Yeah, and I would say the libraries are more important than ever, and librarians who are being credentialed, with the Common Core research skills, because this is the original Common Core is all about one original source documents and learning how to research and access those, and that's where the librarians are really critical with the whole admin of
Critical
Common
that,
Core.
and also working with all of our teachers that are credentialed and do all that work with us, so they are part of the overall.
Well, one of the things that you have to keep in mind, though, is that several of us ran on the concept of changing the model from top down to grassroots up. And you need to literally go to libraries. You cannot sit inside LSS and say, okay, this is how a library should work, because you're not competent to do that. So you need to go into the libraries, let librarians speak for themselves. Not just the credentialed librarians. There's a lot more text than there are credentialed librarians. And let them explain to you what their role is now, what they feel their role should be, and how they feel they could serve the students. That's the first place you start.
And I'm sorry if I led you to believe that I would be that person doing that. I don't ever...
No, I wasn't speaking to particularly just LSS as a sort of omnipotent being.
Whoa, okay. Well, I'd like to think that we as a whole team are working with everyone in the system, so if we're not, please let us know. I mean, that's poor for us.
Ms. Beatty?
Yes, Susan.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I think that our process for tackling this agenda item is flawed. We're almost 45 minutes discussing this, and we have yet to agree on a single consensus item.
No, I beg to differ.
I'd suggest we put the points forward to staff, let them consolidate them, find where we are in common agreement, and then take that forward for consideration at the next board meeting.
Well, I am the chair, and I will overrule. This is a process. We are a new board, and I think the process is important. It's as important as the end result. And we did come to consensus that there is interest in looking at libraries as a priority. We eliminate the class size reduction. That was not a priority. So I will move to another item. Does somebody want to put another item forward?
Special education is up there 3 times.
Special education. Okay,
I can't
so
really
that.
tell if that was seen.
Yeah, and I think that's been brought to our attention. We received emails of threat lawsuits.
We have a
There's
report coming on this, though. It's soon.
Okay, does that address the special education instructional aids, or is that's
No,
kind of
I don't think so.
yeah. Well, mine was about the classroom instructional aids, full-time positions, getting adequate staffing. It's become a legal liability and as well as a priority for.
Yeah, I think encompassed in my point number 2 on the
Would
far
you
right,
speak to that?
which is that as part of getting us back to 2008 in whatever current day version that is. We have to undo some of the things we were forced to do in the past, like the IAs. We have all these IAs that are 3 hours on contract, 3 hours on timesheets. They're not happy. We can't hire good ones because no one will work here.
Well, I've heard teacher complaints.
Yes,
well.
and I think parent complaints in terms of the service and continuity to the students. So that was obviously something that was done out of brutal economic necessity. I can't believe anybody wanted to set that system up. And so, altering that, I think, not only creates a point of equity and morality within the district, but it also serves the special ed students and, depending upon their input, special ed teachers.
Who else had the special ed? You said it was up there
Charles,
3 times.
comment on what you just said. We still have not received any input from the people it affects. that librarians. Now, all you said, you've heard the complaints of the librarians, you've heard the complaints of the parents, but what will help the libraries the best? I like to go to the source and find out. Ask the people if you got to do it. They've got to implement anything that we want them to do. How do we know what they want?
I sleep with one every night. I know precisely what she wants. Vis-a-vis the
No,
librarians.
wait, that's fine.
So we're good there.
Yeah,
Now-
you're good.
Now,
But I'm not.
okay. Well, she'll be glad to sit down and explain to you.
I'd like to sit down
So,
with all of them. One isn't going to do it.
no, I've gotten plenty of feedback from all the
You
librarians,
should. Your wife works
as
for
well as the IAs. So some of us have been out there waiting through the unhappy.
Okay. I don't know what to tell you, but I agree with Zane that hey, the lesson. It's almost to me it's a lesson of futility. You're going to end up with 15 pages, and we're going to have all your priorities. Each one of us can fill a page with the priorities. And what are we going to do with them?
Well, as I said, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, but as I also said, according to the California School Boards Association, this is your most important job, and that is determining the strategic vision, priorities, and goals of the district, and having that inform your budget priorities.
But
That is your central
I
job.
agree.
This is
I
where
agree
this
with that.
is.
If I'm informed
It's
as
really
what your
ongoing.
staff wants,
Right.
not that we make it up and tell the staff, here it is. I'd like to get it from the staff. I keep saying that, but I don't know. I don't know if anybody's
Well,
listening to me.
the LCAP, excuse me, please. The LCAP that we got last year, it's an ongoing document. It's a 3-year working
Yeah,
document,
yeah.
and we got extensive amount of information from the LCAP. We're also getting we have access to community. We have the president of the classified union. The library techs, librarians come under classified, so there's somebody to reach out to who represents those employees if you'd like more information. Or
I'd like to ask my fellow board, how many reports have you received from these organizations about the library? I mean, that actually give you their needs, what they want, what they think is best for the librarians together. I mean, how many people have got that facts and figures in front of them?
Here,
that can,
I'll give you this email. This is from
that's how many people involved in that?
Rancho Bernard Friends of the Library. That's a substantial.
And we
group.
from the Friends of the Library every year for the last 19 years, and it's the same thing.
Well, if we're-
I'm
if
s-
we're-
That would indicate we're ignoring them, I think. is what that
We're
said.
not ignoring. I mean,
like
it's
the
a matter
email.
of what is this is a high priority. I think there's other things that we spend our money on that are higher priority than the library.
Okay, well, go ahead, put one forth. Let's have a discussion.
I think you're missing the point, and I don't know if it's right now we're having discussions more about the process. We cannot agree on process here, and I agree with Andy's issues with this process we're trying to undertake. There are a lot of difficulties here. Yes, I have priorities, but they're uninformed for the most part by real concrete information and recommendations. I have talked to people. Yes, I have received some recommendations, not one of them an official recommendation prior to formulating my list. I have a list because you asked us to think about these things, and I did. But it's my best shot, and I'm coming to 6 months on the board, and a kindergartner and a second grader. It's no wonder that my list is focused on elementary school. I don't have information to lead me to independently come up with these. I have a lot of special education type of goals, but that's my life. So I understand the frustrations here, and I agree. It's very difficult to put this together without recommendations. We can go, yes, that's really important. Yes, that's really important. Try and come up with them off the top of my head, which you've articulated very clearly that you don't feel like yours are off the top of your head. I feel like mine are. They're really just my experience.
Okay, so it sounds like we want to get more input. Is it all documentation that we just found out has been put on board shared? Would that inform the board's decision-making process? We can review that documentation and just reschedule the meeting for, in a week once we get to take a look at that, and we can keep this since Noreen and Kimberly spent
I know
significant
it's
time
enough.
reading that.
Andy's
and so-
talking about getting information from all of the employee groups. I don't think that's included in
and what's been posted
No,
in the.
I don't
My
think that's in
understanding
there.
is, but
Is it there too?
that's the LCAP process. The LCAP process is to get all the information from the stakeholders, and we're now. The reason for doing this was because this day we were getting the draft of the LCAP. Then we're getting the backup documentation, or it's already been put on board shared drive. So it's just a matter of going and looking at that. Like they said, it was a chick survey. I don't know if Innovation U was on there. The other one, the LCAP.
Well, we have two leaders. 2 out of 3 of the union presidents are in the room. Our third is gone. Do you feel like the LCAP goals that we've seen encapsulate what you have prioritized for your group of employees? Or do you want to submit something additional for us to consider?
You'd like to provide a format for us to provide.
LCAP meeting, just for bargaining units. Did you provide your input at the LCAP meeting?
I'm not
Okay.
Forum was not provide us with enough options. But it was pre-programmed. Question. It was to see what other questions were being asked. Really didn't feel that was a complete.
Okay, so I think that's in part what I was getting at, what Andy was getting at as well, that we want to make sure we have input from all of the employee units. When
If you
we try
haven't
to
already
formulate
gotten it
this.
from them, how do you intend to get it then?
Well,
From
I
classified unit?
I have my ideas about what PSC I feel are important because I've seen a lot of documentation, and then it's been officially given to the higher board.
The Friends of the Library seem to be able to send an email, and that's given consideration, so we'll accept an email as well.
That sounds fair.
You could solicit it too.
You asked this question as far as, I got lost my mind, but as far as us listing top five priorities for each one, I'd like to ask these groups to do the same thing to us. If nothing else, and say, give me your top five priorities, what you feel you need, and if you had the money, the budget, the money to do these things, what would be your top priority to help in the library, for example? What would be your top priority for teachers? Would they prefer to have a raise? Would they prefer to have in-service training? What? What are the priorities? Because I'm sure they've got a list of priorities. If you ask the teachers, you'll get different results. But when we get the different priorities for the different groups, we can sit down as a board, we got our own, and we can just try to meld those and try to determine in a discussion group, because all these people here just sitting, listening to us discuss it, I don't know, 10 o'clock, the last hour and a half, we could do this in our own group, in our own session, with the administrative staff that has the background, give us the information, and then we can maybe get through all this stuff and decide on a list of priorities. Because right now, I have the input to do it.
Hey, Mel, could you just address what is on the board shared? You who mentioned, was you or Malia who mentioned that had been posted? Could you just clarify what that information is?
We have a report from USD of all of the forum data. So many of you attended some of the forums, so that was all put together. There is a study by Hanover. We had a parent perception survey that went out to 8,700. We had 8,700 responses from our parents. So there's a report there that called through all the data, and you can see that we have quantitative data also with that.
You got the student survey too?
We have the student survey that's separate.
It's in the shared drive.
That's in the shared drive also. So we have those, and if there are other pieces that you would like, we're happy to do that. It just, you can get inundated for days. We read them, and that's where we try to come up with the best larger priorities under which, when I'm looking at some of these would fall under as part of the plan to make these actions and services real. So again, the priorities are large, so we kind of have a direction, and I can look at some of these and see how it fits where we are. The more granular we get around that, it's a little bit harder for that. So when I think of a priority, I think very big. I'm not thinking something very specific. So
we were all at one or the other of the Lcap meetings, and they the community members, parents who are there, I mean, they're not thinking big, bringing up the smaller, more tangible ideas. Were those incorporated in the? This is all broad stuff, and I know
So the
they're
reports
the
were around themes that came out from specific data that the parents shared. So that's what we did, is we elevated everything that was there into some larger themes that we've integrated into the LCAP plan.
Well, and I'll take my friend Richard Mason as an example, and he's there with his tattered French workbook that the kids can't write in, that he carries with him. So he and other parents would say, here's some changes we'd like to see happen, and it was, how do you go from that very specific to then broad? And are there any reports that have more specific? Does the USD report have more specific information?
You'll have some quotes out of there, but not that specific. So when I think about the tattered textbooks, when we look at instructional materials dollars as they come to us in increases, then we can add that into the priorities so we can help to replace those.
But was that encapsulated in this one, in the presentation tonight? Or
It's around instructional resources where it's encapsulated. Again, it's the larger picture around that particular piece, and as we delve down, we know that we have textbooks that need to be replaced. We don't say anyone in specifically. But we will bring those up, and we can work on those as time goes on.
I also would just like to draw us all back to the mission and the purpose of why we're here. What are the goals of the district? And it's not about what the librarians want, and it's not about what do that group of employees want. It's about what's going to best serve our kids. And there are limited resources that we have. And I'm really worried by saying, well, let's just go back to where we were 5 years ago or 8 years ago and have everything the same as it was then. Because our world and our kids are not the same as they were 8 years ago. And the demands from the state are not the same as they were 8 years ago. we have to elevate this conversation to not what do people want, but what do we believe. We want people to share their input with us, but we have a responsibility of creating an educational system that meets the needs of our kids and that meets the needs and the requirements of the state of California. That's our job. And we can all look at that differently, but at some point somebody's got to make a decision. How are we going to do that? How are we going to use the resources effectively to do the things that the board has set as their goal, to ensure that every child is in a 21st century learning environment, that we have personalized learning for children, that every child is safe, that the social and emotional needs of kids. If you tell me it's important that we get back to having our library staffed the way they were 8 years ago, I'm going to ask you why. Why?
Kids are knocking on the door at lunchtime and it's locked because the library has to take her half-hour lunch time.
And if you ask librarians, they're going to say we need more library time. If you ask custodians, they're going to say we need 5 more custodians on our campus. If you ask classroom teachers, they're going to say I want class size of 20.
John, you're buying into the same process we all are here, and we're just going around and around the flagpole. We've been at it for an hour on one item in the library. I'd like to find out a way that we can process the stuff, that we got some kind of procedure, and we got the 5 priorities. What do we do with it? How do we reach consensus on what's the best priority? There's no direction. We don't have anybody to coordinate our efforts and to how to come to this conclusion of what's best for our top priorities. Right now, we're just bouncing off the wall.
And your staff has gone through a process for several months of gathering input from the community, looking at the requirements of the state, asking the experts who work for us, how are we going to get there? And that's what this Lcap plan has for you. Now, if there's something we've missed and how we're going to achieve our goals, then you tell me that. That's what I'd like for the board to be focused on. Do you think, as a board, we should put more money into reducing class size? Okay.
If I may say respectfully, I think that's what I said. We've come full circle. We've come forward with proposal goals, priorities. From my list that I made coming in here, 4 of them matched up with what you got already.
What were 4 that matched up? I'm curious.
Special ed training resources, putting more towards, tangential thoughts, more into reserves for unfunded mandates. That aligns with goal number 6 in the 14-15 LCAP, goal number 2 in 15-16.
Didn't you just explain that? Is that, what are you saying here, just transferring pots of money? Or
no, we talked about setting or coming up with ideas, goals, or priorities, and it would be, go back to the staff and say, well, how could we do that? Mm-hmm. Right? I'm not going to pretend to say right now I know exactly how to do that.
I'm just not understanding what your priority is.
I think one of my top priorities would be to do more in the way of special ed training and resources. And furthermore, we ought to look to see what we do to put more into reserves for unfunded state and federal mandates when it comes to special ed. That, for me, is a priority. All right? So that's back into the stuff. How do we do that? Where does that fit into the existing LCAP? If it doesn't, is there consensus on making it fit into the LCAP?
Special ed training and resources means hiring more special ed teachers, training ones who have.
Yeah, it could mean that.
That's our decision.
Yeah, it could mean that, but I'm going to see what comes back from staff in that regard. That aligns, like I said, currently with goal number 6 for LCAP 2014-15 and goal number 2 for 15-16 LCAP. Career and college readiness. I have a personal preference for the College Bound program, College Bound Poway program. They put forward a proposal. More STEM and robotics initiatives. I think each was actually got an email on that word today. Mm-hmm. That coincides with LCAP in 2014 with number 8. In 2015-16 coincides with goals number 2 and number 4. Campus safety programs. I think it's priority for physical facilities and online safety for students. That coincides with LCAP goal number 16, number 4 in 2014 and 15, and number 3 in 15-16. Teacher training and support coincides with 2014-15, number 5, number 9, and number 1 in 2015-2016. The only one of my 5 that I didn't see specifically in LCAP has to do with my interest in seeing out-of-pocket expenses for parents, especially for school sites without foundation assistance. So if the way that we do something with our unfunded or unrestricted reserves in that regard, I have an interest in that. So that's what I'd like to see the board take back, or the staff take back and see where does that fit? How can we do that? And that's what we should do with each of us. And maybe there's an overlapping sense on some of these that I just articulated. It sounds like there is just from looking at these, but I don't think that we collectively need to do that process right here and now.
They're a little non-specific, like out-of-pocket expenses. I mean, I pay for, you can pay for.
They're intentionally non-specific.
No, but I'm just asking for clarification. So you're talking about copy paper and Band-Aids, or are you talking about, hiring the PE teacher?
Cutting down field trip expenses, school bus expenses, anything that a parent has to pay a pocket.
Number 4 here, and I was trying to make that point earlier. Right. Number 1 here fits in his number 1. His is just broader.
Let staff consolidate our top 5, bring it back, and see what's overlap. Just because I don't have it as a priority doesn't mean I don't think it's important. So
staff can consolidate all of this, and then, but then, eventually it has to, it gets into actually an action plan, whether or not it can be implemented in 15, 16.
Staff would come back to report to us. These are the
That'll be
years.
budgetary constraint. Like the
Exactly.
Cosgrove is excellent program. It's expensive.
It's expensive,
It's
and actually, I think the
massive.
bull's looking forward. I don't want to rest too much. Probably, we would need to work on trying to bring that cost down a little bit if we could.
Okay, so that sounds, it sounds like there's a consensus that we've got these great posters written up. Staff can do some, you're saying they will do the consolidation work instead of us.
Yeah, just come back. They tell us, where did we overlap? Where was the consensus among us?
And on the overlapping items, that can be the base for our discussion.
Right.
That's informed by staff input
Correct.
on what they already have or what exists or what
Exactly.
they recommend going forward. Okay, I like that. I think that's all good.
I'm very in favor of this because it will end our meeting soon.
And it puts, and I'm sure staff is thrilled. We're putting more work on them as well. So,
But this is only 2025 recommendations, not how many you got over months of
And this
LCAP
is what they
firms.
want from us, a higher level. And they're about to incorporate specifics into those very broad LCAP goals that were presented anyway. So now giving them a chance to incorporate some of these specifics.
and then we'll just, we'll come back and figure out when the next meeting is on that. I have a quick question. Mel, we had back in DLAC last year, did a report. When did that come around this year?
It's ready. I just don't have it here yet. The responses from John to their comments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
we
how,
have it.
that's the first time we see it, is
Yeah.
when he responds to the comments?
So we have that. We just didn't bring that forward yet. We're happy to give that to you also. Can I, this is my other point of clarification. On Monday, I am bringing these forward at a first read, a public hearing. I'm going to bring because I'm not putting specific plans together. This is really just a larger picture. This, to me, some of this is kind of B work, if you will, but ensuring that some of the higher level pieces there are shown within the goals. I could send you an email where I think I see that. I don't. But again, this is a larger picture that we're trying to present on Monday for a public hearing. So if I get a question very specifically around those, I'm just going to remind us that it is the bigger priorities, and I'll let you know. I'll work on it through the weekend and let you kind of know where I think I see it.
Exactly.
So I just want to ask one more time then, because you said you're bringing back the bigger priorities. So how do big priorities mesh with this, where we actually have line item budget, requisitions for custodian, groundskeeper? So how do those two connect? Your broad priorities and MAGA's line item
So the
specifics.
operational costs are really important for the functioning of our district. A lot of what MALA has brought there for me will lie under the environment upon which our students attend and our staff attend every day, if you look at the pieces that are there. How increases the insurance and all that stuff? No. I mean, that's an operational piece. That is an ongoing piece that we have to take care of.
This is not LCAP. This is staffing. These are critical needs, or they're things that, are ongoing commitments.
Actually, it's a combination of both. So some of the items are mandatory items, like the insurance increase and so on, and the second column. But the other areas, like the custodian or the groundskeepers or the painters or the things that we have done, was based on input from the community forums and parents expressing that needed these at the school sites. So it's a blend of both.
Wait, say that in the parents' meeting.
For example, last year when we had the 2013-14 public forums right in this room, I was sitting with a lot of parents who kept talking about the lack of custodial staff, the lack of groundskeepers. They mentioned about high school in particular, how the grounds weren't taken care of. And more lately, we've been hearing about Mesa Verde Middle School, things like this that is input that can be tied into the LCAP goals. So that document is a combination of both of those.
Okay.
Priorities as well as needs that I have to budget for.
Okay, thank you. All right, any further questions, comments, or from the board? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thanks.